when a shared nightmare of 7 billion people became a reality, turning Earth into a literal dungeon society. While countless guilds rise and fall like the tide, one new name is about to flip the entire system on its head. The top players in Korea are gathered, but everyone's looking at the newest entry on the list with total confusion. Badass? The name on the meeting room door looks more like a joke than a top-tier hunter organization. Team leader Shin Tae-gil stares at the paperwork in disbelief, wondering if he's actually supposed to take a guild named Badass seriously. Our boy Hyeon just sips his coffee, looking completely unbothered by the government guy's judgment. He casually explains that the name means very cool and awesome guys, asking Tae-gil if his English is a bit rusty. Tae-gil just sighs, pointing out that cool and awesome are basically the same thing, while Hyeon just doubles down on the vibe. Despite the ridiculous name, Hyeon is confident it's got a great ring to it, and he's not changing it for anyone. Tae-gil gives up and moves on, reminding Hyeon that the strategy meeting for the C-rank Vanandi's Forest is the real priority. The meeting is set for next Monday at 1100 a.m. sharp, and the government guy practically begs Hyeon not to be late. Hyeon gives a non-committal "I'll try," which Tae-gil knows is code for "I'm definitely going to be late." In this new dungeon society, being a hunter isn't just a job, it's a survival game played out on live TV. In the midst of the chaos, hundreds of people are dying every day, and the stakes for the Gangnam raid couldn't be higher. The screen cracks as we head into a week of preparation that's going to decide the fate of Seoul. Monday arrives at the ministry building, and the heavy hitters of the hunter world are already showing up in force. And Yoo-seong stands in the lobby, checking his phone and looking like he's already bored of the professional atmosphere. He notes that Hyeon is predictably late and asks Sung-ah if their leader said anything about his whereabouts. Yoo-seong casually calls Sung-ah sis because she's 20, but she looks more confused by his lack of boundaries than anything else. Suddenly, a pair of familiar sneakers walks into view, moving with a very relaxed stride. Hyeon waves them over, casually apologizing for being late because he had a sudden bathroom emergency. Yoo-seong just stares at him, realize our MC really has zero filter when it comes to social situations. The psycho immediately targets the ridiculous, bug-eyed cartoon character on Hyeon's shirt, asking what that stupid-looking thing is. Hyeon gets defensive, claiming this character is actually the hottest thing among kids these days and that Yoo-seong is just out of touch. Yoo-seong isn't buying it, giving the shirt a look of pure judgment that would wither a normal person. Hyeon explains he's trying to fix his public image because people on the internet keep saying he looks like a serial killer. Yoo-seong asks if he's actually serious, doubting that a bug-eyed cartoon is going to make anyone feel safer around him. He points out that the character looks like it's screaming for death and will probably make children cry in the streets. Hyeon freezes as a core memory of a kid crying in the parking lot earlier that morning suddenly makes perfect sense. He realizes his attempt at a friendly image was an absolute disaster from the moment he put the shirt on. Inside the meeting room, the atmosphere is the complete opposite. Tense, professional, and deadly serious. The leaders of Korea's top guilds are checking their watches, clearly annoyed by the lack of punctuality from the newcomer. Han Myung-do of the Immortal Guild grumbles that they've already wasted 5 minutes waiting for a guild they've never heard of. Lee Cheong-gun, the commander of the Black Knights, notes they are still missing 2 more guilds before they can begin. Park Se-hyun of the Guardian Guild mentions that the Flame Dragon Guild is always late, but this new group seems like even bigger troublemakers. Choi Dong-woo, the nation's hero, sits with his arms crossed, his silent presence exerting more pressure than everyone else combined. Han Seon, the master of Donggun, stares blankly ahead, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else but here. Tae-gil stands at the front, letting out a long, stressed-out breath as he realizes his carefully planned meeting is falling apart. He tells the room he needs to make a quick call, his face beads with sweat as the top hunters in the country glare at him. He steps out into the hallway, the sound of his footsteps echoing as he frantically pulls out his phone. The phone rings and rings, but Hyeon isn't picking up, probably because he's too busy arguing about his shirt. Tae-gil is losing it, running his hand through his hair and wondering why he staked his reputation on a guy like Kang Hyeon. He decides to try calling An Yoo-seong instead, scrolling through his contacts with shaking fingers. Finally, the call connects, and Tae-gil looks like he's just seen a ghost as he waits for someone to answer. He introduces himself as team leader Shin Tae-gil, his voice full of desperation as he asks for their location. On the other end, Yoo-seong casually tells him to not live like that, which leaves the government official completely stunned. The psycho tells Taegil there's no improvement in his life, and prepares to hang up because he's in the middle of something fun. Taegil screams for him to wait, trying to explain that this is the Special Awakener management team calling. Yuseong finally recognizes him as the government man from the dungeon, his voice dripping with playful mockery. He jokes that he thought it was a voice-phishing scam, which nearly gives Taehyul a stroke right there in the hallway. Taehyul demands to know when Kang Hyun is coming, reminding them that the entire elite roster of Korea is waiting. Yuseong just tells him to hold on, giving a chilling smirk and saying things are about to get very fun very soon. Taegil is confused, his government logic unable to process what a psycho like Yuseong considers entertaining. Yuseong's grin widens as he suggests that Taegil should come out and watch the show for himself. He drops the bomb. "Bro, Kang Hyun just got into a fight!" Taegil can only utter a confused what as the elevator bell dings, signaling the arrival of the badass chaos. Inside the elevator, things have already gone south as Hyun grabs a high-ranking hunter by the collar. His eyes glow with a lethal red light, his voice a low growl as he asks the guy if he thinks he's really that good at fighting. The man in his grip is Park Hoyeon, the master of the Flame Dragon Guild, and he looks absolutely terrified. Hoyeon is frozen, his mind racing as he tries to figure out what kind of crazy person would pick a fight in a government building. The other hunters in the hallway are in total shock. This new guy is literally attacking the master of one of Korea's top 3 guilds. Hyun stares him down with the intensity of a predator, leaving everyone wondering if our boy has finally lost his mind. Rewind to just a few minutes ago, the elevator dings as Hyun and his crew prepare to head to the meeting. Our boy is checking the floor directory, casually noting that the strategy meeting is up on the 11th floor. He hits the button with an ow key, acting like he's going to a casual lunch rather than a high-stakes war council. He keeps pressing the button, his impatience starting to show as the elevator doors slowly begin to slide shut. Yuseong and Sunga stand behind him, looking like the ultimate bodyguard duo for a guy who definitely doesn't need them. Suddenly, a hand slams into the door, forcing the elevator to stop and slide open again. A group of hunters led by a man in a tan trench coat stares into the elevator, the tension rising instantly. The man in the coat smiles politely, asking if they can squeeze in too, despite the elevator already looking pretty full. Hyun shrugs it off with a, "Yeah, sure," but he's already eyeing the 2 giant armored knights standing behind the leader. The stranger's smile is thin and practiced, the kind of expression you only see on someone who thinks they're better than everyone else. He notes they're all heading to the 11th floor and asks if they're also going to the C-rank strategy meeting. He introduces himself as Park Hoyeon, the master of the Flame Dragon Guild, and Hyun introduces himself as the master of Badass. Hyun is internally grumbling, wishing these guys would just hurry up because his bathroom break already made him late. The armored knights step in, their heavy gear clanking loudly against the metal floor of the elevator. Suddenly, a loud, high-pitched beep echoes through the small space, cutting through the awkward silence. A red warning flashes on the display, overcapacity. The system demands that the last person to board must exit immediately. Everyone looks at the 2 massive knights in full plate armor, who are clearly the reason the weight limit just got smashed. Hyun wonders why these idiots are wearing full battle gear just to sit in a boardroom meeting across town. Hoyeon apologizes with a fake-sounding laugh, but he doesn't make any move to have his men step out. Instead, he asks if Hyun would mind getting out and letting the important guilds go up first. Sunga and Yuseong both freeze, their expressions shifting from boredom to genuine "are-you-kidding-me" shock. Hyun just blinks, his brain processing the sheer level of audacity this guy just displayed. Hoyeon smugly points out that his guild is quite big and will play a much more important role in the coming attack. He argues that it's simply more efficient for the heavy hitters to get to the meeting first. He basically calls Hyun's group a second-rate guild and expects them to just bow out like good little side characters. He smirks as if he's just stated an obvious fact of nature, looking down his nose at our boy. Sunga clenches her fist, telling her lord that she's ready to break some legs and knock out some teeth right now. Hyun just lets out a long, slow breath, the shadows falling over his eyes as his patience finally hits 0. He gives a chilling, closed-eye smile, the air in the elevator suddenly feeling 10 times heavier. "Do you want to die?" The question hangs in the air as we cut back to the present, with Hyun holding Hoyeon by the throat. Taegil is sweating bullets as he watches the fight, his eyes wide with terror as he realizes his meeting is officially a disaster. He tries to regain control, reminding them that this is an incredibly important national security meeting. Hyan casually lets go, scratching his head and joking that he has a disease where he has to beat someone up to feel better. Hoyan is fuming, his face red with rage as he calls Hyan a son of a bitch for humiliating him in front of his peers. Taegil screams for everyone to stop, finally ending the hallway brawl and ordering them into the meeting room. As they sit down, Han Myeongdo of the Immortal Guild raises a hand, his expression cold and calculating. He suggests that since they have a new face in the room, they should let him introduce himself properly before they get to work. Taegil agrees, looking relieved to finally have something resembling a normal procedure to follow. He asks Mr. Kang Hyun to stand up and give the group a brief introduction of his badass guild. Hyun mutters that he feels like they're only asking just to make him feel included, while Yusong laughs that they've already figured him out. Our boy clears his throat, standing up with his bug-eyed cartoon shirt on full display for the top hunters in the country. He introduces himself as the Master of Badass, noting the guild was founded just a few days ago. He casually mentions they have exactly 3 members, including himself, and then just sits back down. The room goes dead silent as the elites try to process the fact that a 3-person guild is joining a C-rank raid. Hoyan explodes, screaming that this strategy meeting isn't a joke, and that a tiny guild like that has no business being there. Hyan snaps back, telling the Red Guild guy that he only came because the government called him, so he's staying. Hoyan stands up, looking ready for round 2, his ego unable to handle the MC's total lack of respect. Suddenly, a massive laugh booms through the room, making everyone jump in their seats. Han Myeongdo is cracking up, saying he likes Hyun's guts and that a guildmaster should have that kind of attitude. Hoyon grits his teeth, his anger boiling over as he realizes he's losing the room's respect to a guy in a cartoon t-shirt. Choi Dongwoo finally speaks, his voice like rolling thunder as he addresses the room. He tells them this is not the place to fight, and that the meeting is already way behind schedule. Hoyon shuts up immediately, not wanting to cross the most powerful man in the country. He slumps back into his chair, fuming in silence as the official briefing finally begins. Yusong leans over, whispering, bro, to get Hyan's attention during the boring PowerPoint presentation. He points to the guy sitting right next to him, the master of the Guardian Guild. Hyan blanks on the name, calling it the Wayward Guild before Yusong corrects him that it's the Guardian Guild. The psycho's grin turns sharp and predatory, a dark light flickering in his eyes as he stares at the other master. He tells Hyan to just wait and see, as he pulls up a system window with a look of pure malicious joy. Because I'm going to kill him right now. Yuseong's words chill the air as he prepares to start a war right in the middle of the room. The meeting continues, but Yuseong's words are still echoing as the tension in the room hits a breaking point. He repeats his lethal promise, looking completely ready to commit a high-profile murder in front of a dozen witnesses. Hyan's hand shoots out, gripping Yuseong's wrist with crushing strength to stop him from drawing a weapon. He demands to know what the hell is wrong with the psycho and tells him to let go of the idea immediately. Hyan asks what the hell he's doing, but as he looks into Yuseong's eyes, he suddenly remembers who he's dealing with. He realizes Yuseong has been a complete lunatic from the very start, and his 6th sense never picks a fight for no reason. Taegil notices the commotion, standing up behind his podium and ordering them to put their weapons down. Hoyan jumps up, pointing an accusing finger and screaming that he knew these badass bastards would eventually screw everything up. Yuseong ignores everyone, drawing a glowing purple dagger as he prepares to lunge at the Guardian Master. Park Se-yoon's own guild members draw their swords, demanding to know why they're being targeted out of nowhere. They ask their master for permission to engage, but Se-yoon remains motionless, his face shrouded in shadow. One of the Guardian hunters looks terrified, sensing that something is very, very wrong with his boss. He calls out to his master again, but Se-yoon doesn't respond. His body is starting to vibrate with a dark energy. The master's face is contorted in agony, thick purple veins bulging from his forehead as he lets out a guttural, inhuman growl. He lets out a glass-shattering scream as his body begins to mutate, throwing the entire boardroom into total chaos. He clutches his head, the red energy radiating from him so intensely that it starts cracking the walls of the room. He slams his hands onto the table, shattering the expensive wood into splinters with a single monstrous impact. A terrifying, inhuman hiss escapes his lips as his eyes turn into blank, glowing orbs of pure malice. Choi Dongwoo stands up, his spear materializing in his hand as he asks the question everyone's thinking, why? One of the guardian hunters tries to touch Se-yoon's shoulder, terrified for his master's safety. Se-yoon looks up, but the man behind the eyes is gone, replaced by something ancient and hungry. His skin is graying and cracking, looking more like an undead monster than a human hunter. In a blur of motion, Se-yoon's hand whips out, moving faster than anyone in the room can react. He grabs his own guild member by the throat, the sound of snapping bone echoing through the silent room. He throws the body aside like it's a ragdoll, a geyser of blood spraying across the floor, and the badass trio. The mutated master lunges forward, his speed and power having increased tenfold during the transformation. The other hunters scramble to defend themselves, but Se-yoon is a whirlwind of destruction, cutting down anyone in his path. Hyeon stares at the carnage, muttering "what the hell" as he realizes the magnitude of the situation. Yuseong just gives a twisted grin, asking Hyeon if he still thinks they should have let this slide. He pulls his arm free from Hyeon's grip, his own aura flaring to life as he prepares for the fight of his life. "Just die!" Yuseong screams, swinging his mace with enough power to level a building. The impact is massive, but Se-yoon catches the blow with his bare hands, the shockwave shattering every window in the room. Yuseong is sent flying back, his weapon vibrating from the sheer force of the counterattack. He wipes a trickle of blood from his lip, laughing that the thing is actually a lot tougher than it looks. Hyeon agrees, his eyes glowing red as he steps forward to join the fray. Dongwoo and Seon prepare to intervene, realizing that a monster of this level could destroy the entire building. The atmosphere is heavy, with the mana of 5 different top-tier hunters all preparing to strike at once. The Black Knight commander leaps onto the table, his sword glowing with a dark light. The mutated Se-yoon roars, the air around him becoming a vortex of dark energy that pushes everyone back. Hyeon pushes past Yuseong, his movements calm and purposeful as he approaches the monster. He gives a savage grin, asking the room, "How about I hit him first?" He launches a punch, his fist shrouded in a dark, explosive mana that seems to swallow the light. Bam! The impact is so powerful that it creates a sonic boom, shaking the entire government complex to its foundations. The mutated master is slammed into the wall, the reinforced concrete buckling and cratering around his body. The dust settles to reveal the room in ruins, with everyone staring at the badass leader in absolute silence. Se-yoon lies on the floor, his body broken and the dark mutation finally starting to fade. Seon asks if he's dead, her voice trembling slightly for the first time in the entire series. One of the other masters notes they couldn't even restrain him and that the monster was far stronger than they imagined. Everyone is left wondering what the hell just happened and why a guild master would suddenly turn into a demon. Hyeon looks at Yuseong, a new sense of respect and fear growing for his blonde-haired teammate. He wonders how Yuseong knew exactly when the mutation would happen, even before the mana itself changed. He realizes it must be a unique ability, something that allows Yuseong to see the future or sense imminent death. A sudden realization hits Hyeon like a freight train, and his eyes widen with shock. If Yuseong can sense future threats, then every crazy thing he's ever done must have had a hidden reason. Hyeon remembers the first time they met, and wonders if Yuseong was actually saving him even back then. He looks at Yuseong, who is standing in the shadows, looking more mysterious and dangerous than ever. The psycho just rubs his neck, saying that was a fun little fight, and looking like he's ready for round 2. Hyeon just sighs, deciding that it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, his teammate is still a complete psycho bastard. Season 1 has come to an end, but the real war for Korea is just beginning. Stick around, because you won't want to miss what happens in Season 2. In a world where even the strongest hunters can turn into monsters in a heartbeat, one man stands as the ultimate insurance policy against the apocalypse. The emergency meeting at the Ministry of Interior and Safety has been cut short, with officials moving the remaining strategy sessions to a video call after the horrific mutation incident. Our boy Kang Hyun is totally unfazed, letting out a massive yawn like he didn't just explode a guy's head 10 minutes ago. He's complaining about the effort it took to show up early, while Yuseong just smirks, pointing out that 11 a.m. barely even counts as morning for guys like them. The sound of hurried footsteps echoes in the hallway as a government official rushes toward them, eager to catch the MC before he leaves. It's Shin Taegil, and he's looking for a quick moment of Hyeon's time to discuss the guild's future. He tells Hyeon that while he was going to wait until after the formal briefing, there's something the guild needs to see right now. Hyeon barely remembers their previous deal about government support, acting like his good life makes him forget the boring details. Taegil explains that they've finally finished prepping the official headquarters for the badass guild. The MC's eyes light up at the mention of an office, looking way more excited about real estate than he ever does about fighting demons. He's ready to move in immediately, asking where this new home base is located. The government didn't skimp. They've set the guild up in a massive, high-end skyscraper that towers over the rest of the city. Looking at the directory, Guild Badass is sitting pretty on the 13th floor, surrounded by luxury lounges and shopping centers. The elevator doors slide open with a ding, and the trio is absolutely stunned by the massive, sleek, sun-drenched office waiting for them. The place is decked out with top-tier tech, including high-end PCs that would make any pro gamer drool. From expensive espresso machines to high-tech double-door fridges, it's clear the government is trying to buy Hyeon's loyalty with pure luxury. Sung-ah worries if just the three of them can actually fill a space this big, realizing they're going to need a lot more members soon. The crew starts imagining the layout, planning where to put the sofas, and even considering adding a bedroom and shower so they never have to leave. Hyeon reaches for the fridge door, already thinking about the most important part of any guild office. He swings it open with a grin, declaring that they're going to stock this thing top to bottom with beer. Yusong laughs, reminding him that this is technically a workplace, but he's clearly not complaining about the boss's priorities. The moment of peace is broken as Sung-ah calls out to her, "Lord," her voice cutting through the excitement. She reminds him that the rescheduled video call with the other guildmasters is about to start at 2 p.m. The screen flickers to life as they log into the ministry's internal network, getting ready for a digital showdown. Hyeon fumbles with the computer, making sure the internet actually works in this fancy new building. As he gets settled, Sung-ah mentions she's stepping out for a bit, leaving the boys to handle the corporate side of things. A digital message pops up on the screen, apologizing for the delay before the faces of Korea's most powerful hunters fill the monitor. Shin Taegil takes the lead, thanking the guild representatives for reconvening after the chaos. The meeting is officially back on, but the atmosphere is heavy as one master asks the question everyone's thinking. What happened to the mutated Master Park Seon? Hyeon whispers to his teammate, wondering if the guy who turned into a monster was actually anyone famous. Yusong explains that the Guardian Guild was ranked 5th in the country, and their master was a man respected for his absolute devotion to humanity. But that respect is gone now. All that's left is the haunting memory of a hero transforming into a nightmare. Yusong teases Hyeon for being totally out of the loop, but Taegil's voice cuts in, asking the MC to stay focused. The government rep sternly tells them to mute their mic if they're just going to chat while the world is at stake. The briefing officially begins. In 5 days, a massive joint raid will hit the C-rank dungeon known as Vanandi's Forest. It's a brutal mountainous terrain crawling with everything from goblins and orcs to massive ogres. When asked what Vanandi means, Taegil admits they don't know yet, but they suspect it's the name of the boss lurking in the shadows. The room goes quiet as the image of a glowing-eyed demon flashes on the screen, a reminder of the power they're up against. Taegil warns them not to let their guard down just because the monsters seem like basic types. His face is dead serious as he explains that the creatures in this forest are on a completely different level of lethality. If normal monsters are a disorganized militia, the ones in Vanandi's forest move like a well-trained professional army. Each monster has individual skills and follows an organized system, making this raid a potential suicide mission for the unprepared. Taegil pleads with the guilds to set aside their egos and move in unison to ensure survival. But these high-rank masters are arrogant. They laugh off the suggestion, insisting they can handle their own sectors without help. Taegil sighs in frustration, but his eyes widen as he spots something on Hyeon's feed. The MC is casually chugging a beer in the middle of a national crisis call. Hyeon freezes mid-sip, beer foam literally dripping from his mouth as he realizes he's been caught. He panics, wondering how the can even got in his hand, while Yuseong just laughs at the absolute lack of professionalism. Sung-ah returns, holding a plastic bag and looking totally innocent, explaining she just wanted to fill the fridge like the boss asked. She even offers some dried squid to the other masters through the camera, completely killing the serious mood of the meeting. Taegil looks like he's aged 10 years in 10 seconds, staring blankly at the screen in pure disbelief. He slumps back in his chair, the weight of the upcoming raid, and Hyeon's antics finally breaking him. He looks at the grid of guildmasters, wondering if this disorganized mess of egos even has a chance. A light flickers overhead as he questions everything, the silence in the room feeling heavier than the monsters they're about to face. The Solo Resurrection title card appears, signaling that the real trouble is only just beginning. Despite the chaos and the beer, the meeting technically ended smoothly, and a new day dawns over the city. The next morning, the office door bursts open with a cheerful greeting, surprising the crew during their morning routine. A man in a sharp suit steps in, announcing himself as Han Yeman and declaring that he starts his first day today. He drops into a deep, formal bow, practically vibrating with nervous energy. He looks up with a sparkling, hopeful expression, begging the team to take good care of him. Hyan looks up from his beer and game console, totally confused about who this random guy is. Yuseong remembers the government rep mentioned hiring someone to handle the guild's paperwork and administrative headaches. Sung-ah hands over a resume, confirming that this guy is their new official paper pusher. Hyan skims the document, trying to gauge if this kid can actually handle the madness of the badass guild. He starts reading out Jaemoon's height and weight, making the new guy panic about why he even included those details. Jaemoon is internally screaming, unable to believe he's actually standing in front of the legendary Kang Hyun. He's totally starstruck, thinking Hyun looks even more like a dangerous criminal in person, which, in his head, is the coolest thing ever. The narrator identifies him as an awakened nerd, someone who sees the hunter world through the eyes of a fanboy. Hyan shrugs it off, figuring if the government picked him, he must be somewhat competent. The MC reaches out for a handshake, casually offering a starting salary of 1,000 per month as a baseline. Jaemoon is flustered, reaching out with a trembling hand as Hyan tells him to talk to the government rep about taxes and insurance. The kid lets out a roar of determination that echoes through the skyscraper, vowing to work his heart out for the guild. The whole team sits together, the reality of having an actual staff member finally sinking in. Jaemoon is staring at Yuseong and Sung-ah, feeling the massive, overwhelming auras coming off these top-tier hunters. Sung-ah clears her throat, telling Hyan she has something critically important to discuss regarding the guild's image. She points out that since they're growing in scale, they need to start acting like a professional organization. Her eyes sparkle with excitement as she proposes that the entire guild starts wearing matching uniforms. Jaemoon is all for it, thinking official guild merch is the peak of hunter culture. Hyan is skeptical, but Sung-ah isn't taking no for an answer, reaching into her bag with a confident smirk. She whips out a black hoodie with a massive flaming skull and the word badass in metal lettering, and Hyan rejects it instantly. He's horrified, asking why it has a skull and pointing out it looks like something an 80s biker gang would wear. Yuseong pipes up, admitting the design was actually his idea, which explains why it looks so aggressive. Hyan tells them they already look scary enough and don't need to make people even more nervous with edgy clothes. Sung-ah's face drops, and actual tears start rolling down her cheeks at the rejection of her hard work. Hyan is stunned, unable to believe his elite sniper is actually crying over a fashion choice. She reveals she spent a fortune on the design, showing a chat log where she got scammed by an artist for $1,000,000. A flashback shows a shady old shopkeeper convincing her that the material is a legendary jackpot find. The old man claimed they'd been making guild uniforms for 100 years, long before the tutorial even started, which Sung-ah totally fell for. She shook the scammer's hand, thinking she was securing a piece of history for her lord. She even got a special discount, paying 1,300 per piece for a jacket that looks like it belongs at a rock concert. The poor girl spent the night hugging the jackets, convinced that Hyan would be overjoyed with the gift. Back in the present, she drops the jacket and flees toward the bathroom in a state of emotional collapse. The office falls into a dead silence, the three guys left staring at the discarded hoodie on the floor. Yuseong gives Hyan a massive thumbs down, calling him trash for breaking a girl's heart after she worked so hard. Hyan is clutching his head in guilt, realizing he's somehow become the villain of his own office. The sun sets over the city, casting long shadows as the team tries to move past the fashion disaster. Hyan decides to make it up to everyone by throwing a welcome party for the new recruit, heading down to the ground floor. The crew steps out of the elevator, and to avoid more tears, they've all actually put on the edgy skull jackets. Hyan asks Sung-ah if she's happy now, and she beams with a radiant smile, her mood completely restored. The MC just sighs, feeling ridiculous in the biker gear, while Yuseong laughs his head off in the background. They head toward the parking garage to find the van the government provided for the guild. Hyan stops dead in his tracks, his eye twitching as he looks at the vehicle waiting for them. The government-issued van has been completely defaced with giant skull decals and badass graffiti. The flaming skull logo is staring back at them in all its cringeworthy, high-definition glory. Hyan is trembling with rage, asking whose bright idea it was to ruin a perfectly good van. Yuseong raises his hand with a grin, admitting he hired workers to stay up all night, customizing the ride. Hyan loses it, screaming at him to sell the car or scrap it immediately before he loses his mind. Jae-moon watches the chaos, realizing his dream job is a lot more dysfunctional than he imagined. The chapter ends with the new guy questioning his life choices as the Solo Resurrection logo cracks. The badass van roars through the night streets of Seoul, looking like a mobile nightmare under the full moon. Inside, Hyan is still fuming, threatening to kill Yuseong if he doesn't get rid of the car, while the psycho just pats him on the shoulder. Suddenly, the van screeches to a halt as they hit a massive bumper-to-bumper traffic jam. Hyan is annoyed. They're supposed to be going to eat premium beef, and now they're stuck behind a wall of cars. Jaemun looks through the windshield, spotting a group of hunters blocking the road and causing a scene. Hyan's eyes narrow as he realizes this isn't a normal accident, it's a deliberate blockade. He reaches for the door handle, the sound of the latch clicking sounding like a death knell for whoever is outside. He steps out of the skullmobile, looking for whoever is standing between him and his dinner. A massive BAM echoes through the street as something heavy slams into the side of their van. A body comes flying through the air, crashing into the ground right in front of the MC. Hyan's face is cold as a shadow passes over him, his patience finally snapping. Smoke rises from the damaged van as the injured man groans on the asphalt, the traffic around them in total chaos. The man looks up, dazed and bleeding, as Hyan stares down at the mess they've made of his night. Yuseong rushes out, but instead of checking on the MC, he's looking at the car with a horrified expression. Hyan thinks his friend is worried about him, but Yuseong pushes past him, heading straight for the vehicle. He's literally crying over a dent, screaming that his artistic soul was embedded in that car door. The MC just stares blankly, realizing that in this guild, a piece of metal is worth more than his life. The injured hunter on the ground groans, cursing the little kid who threw him with such insane force. He looks up and sees the 3 biker gang members standing over him, looking absolutely menacing. Yuseong's face turns demonic as he grips a piece of the broken car, his aura turning blood red as he threatens to kill the guy. A high-pitched scream rings out as the Solo Resurrection logo appears, signaling the start of a beatdown. Across the street, a group of armored hunters stands ready for war, telling their rivals to try and come at them again. The leader of the group is Jo Dongwon, vice master of the Haisun Guild, and he's ready to throw everyone to the ground. Mocking them from the other side is Woo Jinyoung, vice master of the Jungjin Guild, calling his opponents idiots. One of the Jungjin members asks if their infiltration leader is okay after being blown so far away. Jinyoung laughs it off, claiming the guy has the best durability in the guild and probably didn't even get a scratch. His eyes go wide as he looks past his men, spotting a group of figures emerging from the smoke. Hyan walks forward, dragging the durable infiltration leader by the hair like a piece of trash. With a casual flick of his wrist, he tosses the man back toward his guild members, the body slamming into the pavement with a sickening crunch. Hyan steps on the man's head, his boot grinding into the hunter's face as he demands to know who's in charge. The man can barely apologize through his tears as Hyeon's terrifying gaze locks onto the Jungjin vice master. The armored hunters back away, trembling as they ask who these monsters in skull jackets are. Hyeon lets out a dark grin, realizing these are the Jungjin Guild punks he heard about earlier. He mocks them for causing a turf war in the middle of a public street like a bunch of low-life thugs. His eyes start to glow a predatory red as he reveals his true grievance. Because of their chaos, he hasn't been able to eat his beef! One of the hunters recognizes him, whispering in terror that it's the unstoppable Kang Hyun. They look at the rest of the team, realizing they've stumbled into the middle of the most dangerous guild in Korea. The rumors of the badass guild being a collection of monsters seem very real as Yuseong picks his teeth with a casual smirk. Jinyoung is sweating bullets, looking at the intense aura vibrating off the MC. Hyan drops a number that stops everyone's heart, 500 million won. He gestures to their wrecked van, explaining that between the property damage and the emotional trauma of the blast, they owe him big. The vice master is outraged, calling it absolute bullshit that a minor dent costs that much. Hyan raises a hand, and the mere movement makes the veteran hunter flinch in fear. Yuseong chimes in, demanding another 500 million for his artistic soul, bringing the total to a cool billion. Hyan rounds it up to a neat 10 billion, telling them to pay up or face the consequences. Jin Yong lets out a forced laugh, calling the demand ridiculous before signaling his men to attack. He lunges forward with a burst of speed, intending to end the MC right then and there. He screams DIE as he brings his sword down in a lethal arc. Hyeon doesn't even move, staring at the blade with bored eyes as the world slows down around him. The MC launches a counterpunch, his fist moving so fast it creates a literal shockwave. A massive bang echoes through the street as the punch connects with the force of a falling building. The Vice Master is sent spiraling through the air, his face caved in as he crashes through a concrete wall. The once arrogant hunter is left unconscious and broken in the rubble, his sword shattered beside him. The badass trio stands over the wreckage, with Hyeon casually asking if the fight is over yet. The rival Haesun Guild members are in shock, thanking Hyeon for saving them from a losing battle. Hyeon just waves them off, yawning and telling them he didn't help them on purpose, he was just annoyed. He turns his glare on the Haesun hunters, warning them that he doesn't like them either. He repeats his demand for beef, his voice dripping with hunger-fueled menace. The Haesun Vice Master immediately offers to buy the most expensive premium Korean beef in the city to stay on his good side. Hyeon's mood flips instantly, declaring that their guilds are now allies by blood as he thinks about the meal. The scene fades to black as the badass guild marches off to claim their reward. Deep in the heart of the city, a woman sits in a dark luxury office, watching the events through a screen. She smirks, noting that the Haesun side managed to pull off a clean sweep thanks to their new allies. It's Hong Chaeyeon, master of the Jongjin Guild, and she decides it's time to give the badass newcomers a little warning they won't forget. In this world, hunters are celebrities, but inside the gate, your fame won't stop a goblin's blade from finding your throat. The sizzle of premium beef on the grill is the only thing that matters right now as the badass guild settles in for their victory meal. Jo Dongwon, the Vice Master of the Haesun Guild, introduces himself formally, trying to build a bridge with the man who just saved his men's lives. Hyeon is way too focused on the meat to care about guild names, nearly calling them the Haesang Guild before Yuseong corrects him with a sigh. Dongwon offers to handle the grilling, so the badass trio can focus entirely on enjoying the feast. Hyeon stops him with a look of pure intensity, asking the Vice Master a question that feels like a life-or-death challenge. Are you confident? Our boy declares that the three things he hates most are goblins, Yuseong, and people who ruin good meat. If Dongwon can't grill, he's in serious trouble. The atmosphere at the table is heavy with the scent of charcoal and the silent pressure of the MC's standards. A little later, the table is a graveyard of empty beer and soju bottles, showing that the allies have been going hard. Hyeon chugs his drink like a man who's been thirsty for a century, letting out a satisfied kya as the alcohol hits. He slams his glass down, finally looking Dongwon in the eye and getting down to the real reason for this free dinner. Hyeon cuts right to the chase, asking the Vice Master what he actually wants from the badass guild. Dongwon is taken aback by the bluntness, sweating as he realizes he can't play corporate games with a guy like this. The MC looks at the receipt, noting that this token of appreciation is way too expensive for just a simple thank you. The Vice Master's face goes dark, the weight of his guild's survival resting on his next few words. He fumbles with his hands, admitting it's awkward to bring this up so soon after meeting, but his guild is desperate. He officially begs Hyeon to consider helping the Haesun Guild in their shadow war against the Jongjin Guild. The two guilds used to divide the city's interests evenly, maintaining a fragile balance of power for years. But a week ago, Jongjin started aggressively invading Haesun's territory, acting like they were hunting prey instead of rivals. Dongwon explains that the whole situation felt wrong, like the Jongjin hunters had suddenly become different people. They used to have a tacit agreement of non-aggression, but that respect has been replaced by blatant provocation. The frustration finally boiled over into the street fight Hyeon witnessed, a desperate act by a guild being pushed into a corner. Hyeon casually flips through his phone, finally understanding why a bunch of professionals were brawling like punks in the road. Yuseong is practically vibrating with excitement, begging his bro to let them join the all-out war for the fun of it. Hyeon tells him to shut up, while the new secretary, Jaemoon, realizes he's just stepped into a massive political power shift. Jaemoon is internally freaking out, realizing that a war between these two top-ranked guilds is going to be a super big issue in the hunter world. Hyeon crosses his arms, bluntly stating that badass doesn't really have a personal reason to get involved in someone else's turf war. Dongwon drops his head, knowing the beef isn't enough, but then he leans in with a final, chilling piece of intel. He warns that if things don't change, the Haisun Guild will be completely wiped out by Yongjin's new, unnatural strength. The balance of power is broken because Yongjin is getting stronger at a rate that defies common sense or training. The Vice Master leans in close, checking to see if anyone is listening before dropping the R word. He whispers that a mysterious substance is being circulated among the Yongjin hunters to boost their abilities. Hyun's interest is finally piqued. A drug that enhances awakeners sounds exactly like the mutation conspiracy he's been hunting. The word fishy hangs in the air, the darkness of the room reflecting the growing mystery. Hyun turns to Sunga, asking for the exact time of the upcoming C-rank dungeon raid. She tells him it's in 2 days, and Hyun gives Dongwon a sharp grin, finally agreeing to help them out. He tells the Vice Master he's busy for now, but he'll handle the Jungjin problem right after they finish the joint raid. Dongwon is overjoyed, but Hyun's only follow-up request is to keep the beer flowing as they seal the deal. The flash of a phone camera cuts through the dark, someone in the shadows recording the secret meeting. A digital click echoes as the photo is uploaded to a real-time radar and report board. The post goes viral instantly. "Badass showed up in our neighborhood LOL," featuring a blurry shot of the trio in their skull jackets. The comments are a mess of anonymous hunters wondering if the real thing is actually as scary as they look. Users are debating if Hyun actually likes Korean beef and mocking the over-the-top biker gang outfits. The internet is having a field day with their genuinely unhinged concept, especially the fact that they blew the door off their own van. Back in the light of day, Hyun stares at the phone with a look of pure confusion. Yuseong shows him the post, laughing about how someone managed to catch their private teen dinner on camera. The psycho thinks it's great free PR, but Hyun is just annoyed that he can't even eat in peace anymore. The fun is over as Shin Tae-gil appears, telling them to stop messing around and pay attention to the briefing. The government rep clears his throat, standing before a sea of high-rank hunters gathered at the entrance of the gate. The massive, ornate dungeon doors loom over them as Tae-gil officially announces the start of the raid on Vanandi's forest. He gives a standard speech about national peace and sacrifice, but he knows these hunters are only here for the loot. Tae-gil's face is a mask of professional concern as he begs them all to come back safely from the green hell they're about to enter. Hyun stands at the front, his gaze fixed on the gate, ready to claim every bit of wealth and honor hidden inside. The different guilds stand in line, a colorful and arrogant display of power before they step into the mouth of the beast. The sound of heavy boots hitting the pavement echoes as the first teams move forward. The gate begins to glow with a sickly green energy, the portal to Vanandi's forest finally opening up. A massive stone structure marks the threshold, vibrating with the mana of thousands of monsters waiting within. Tae-gil bows deeply to their retreating backs, wishing them a victory that he knows will be paid for in blood. The sun shines brightly over the lush, mountainous terrain of the dungeon, but the beauty is just a cover for the carnage to come. Our crew steps through the portal, finding themselves at the base of a massive mountain range that feels more like a living organism than a forest. Jo Dongwon claps his hands to gather everyone's attention, taking the lead to organize the disorganized hunters. He admits he's not the official raid leader, but someone needs to provide structure before they get picked off one by one. He reminds them that the monsters here act strategically, warning that danger could strike from any shadow. He whips out a specialized signal flare gun, a lifeline for any team that finds themselves overwhelmed. He explains the code. Red means danger, green means a dungeon core is found, and purple means they've located the boss. The hunters nod along, but their faces show they're already planning how to ditch the group and grab the loot for themselves. Hu Jinyoung from Jungjin mocks Dongwon, calling him a leader without restraint for stating the obvious. With a final good luck, the guild split up, disappearing into the dense foliage. Hyun signals his team to move out, Yuseong and Sunga falling into formation behind him. Suddenly, Dongwon calls out to the MC, asking if the badass guild would be willing to move with his team for the first day. He knows Hyun is capable, but he's worried about the unpredictable nature of a C-rank gate. Hyun looks at the Vice Master, realizing that despite his military stiffness, the guy is actually a decent human being. The MC sighs, remembering that he still owes Dongwon for the beef, and agrees to stick with them for 24 hours. They lock in a handshake, an alliance of convenience born over a charcoal grill. As they walk, Yuseong whispers to Hyun, wondering why they're bothering with these extras when they could clear the place themselves. He complains about the slow pace of moving with a whole company of regular hunters. Hyeon shuts him down, pointing out that in a dungeon of this rank, it's always better to have backup for just-in-case situations. Sunga agrees, but Yusong's expression turns into a dark, disappointed pout. He asks if the MC is chickening out, looking genuinely let down by the lack of immediate chaos. Hyeon catches him trying to pick a fight, calling him a snake for trying to bait him into something dangerous. The Hyesun hunters watch them, wondering if these badass guys think a C-rank dungeon is just a casual playground. One of them dismisses the MC as a rookie who's just trying to look cool for the media. They mock the idea of Hyeon being compared to actual heroes, calling it a disgrace to their profession. Hyeon grabs Yuseong by the head as the psycho's aura starts to flare, telling him to stay still and not pick fights for no reason. Yuseong acts innocent, but he's already pulled out his massive spiked mace, his body practically begging for blood. Hyeon looks exhausted by his own teammate, while Yuseong wonders why the boss looks so defeated before the fight even starts. The MC looks back over his shoulder, his eyes narrowing as he senses a shift in the air. He admits to himself that sometimes just beating everyone up would be more satisfying than playing nice. The universe provides an answer as a horn blasts through the trees. It's an enemy attack! A massive horde of goblin-light infantry erupts from the brush, screaming their war cries as they swarm the hunters. The Hyesun members are instantly overwhelmed, their shields cracking under the sheer number of green bodies. Dongwon shouts orders, trying to establish a defense formation as he realizes these goblins move with terrifying precision. A goblin leaps into the air with a rusted blade, its eyes glowing with a strategic malice that standard monsters shouldn't have. The scene explodes as Yusong's mace slams into the ground, a bam that sends shockwaves through the forest. The psycho has a full-blown hunting high, his face splattered with blood as he laughs like a total maniac. Hyeon steps in, dodging a goblin's strike with casual grace. He lists off his top hates again: An Yuseong, bad grillers, and now these noisy little green bastards. A ZZT of electricity crackles through the air as Hyeon builds up a massive charge in his palms. He grabs a goblin by the face, the monster's eyes widening in terror as the air around them starts to vibrate. Magic explosion! Hyeon detonates the mana, blowing the goblins into chunks as he and Yuseong turn the organized army into a meat grinder. The Haesun hunters stand frozen in horror, realizing the guys they were mocking are actual, literal lunatics. They start weeping, realizing they are cooked if they ever get on the MC's bad side. Night falls over the forest, a red moon hanging in the sky as the survivors huddle around a campfire. Dongwon admits that the rumors didn't do the badass guild justice. Their skill is on a completely different level. The hunters who were mocking Hyeon earlier are now bowing on the ground, begging for forgiveness for their rudeness. Dongwon offers a bowl of soup, asking if they want to move together again tomorrow for safety. Hyeon declines, thanking him but stating they need to move separately to win a bet he made. A flashback shows the dungeon entrance, where the arrogant Woo Jin-young stopped the MC. The Jungjin leader proposed a bet to see who could contribute more to the raid. He wanted to see Hyeon crushed like a dog, making a deal that felt way too personal. Hyeon called him a funny bastard, wondering if the guy had lost his mind or just had a death wish. Jin-young pulled out a glowing blue and white orb, an Easter egg item that he claimed was a prize for whoever wins. The description of the item mentions it was made by someone who likes pranks, which triggers a memory in Hyeon. A vision of a massive, glowing, ethereal figure appears in the MC's mind, a memory of the tutorial and the forces behind it. Hyeon's eyes go wide as he realizes the truth. This isn't just a piece of loot, it's an item directly related to the administrator. The Easter egg orb floats on the screen, a mysterious Z-rank relic that shouldn't even exist on Earth yet. Hyeon is still reeling from the discovery, staring at the item with a look of pure shock and recognition. The image of the hooded administrator, the entity that oversaw his thousands of deaths, flickers in his mind. Jin-young smirks, noting the MC's reaction and realizing that Hyeon knows exactly what he's holding. Hyeon wonders how this brat even found an administrator item, and if he knows the secret of the tutorial. The MC realizes he doesn't know for sure, but he suspects that Jin-young knows more about his status as a tutorial graduate than he's letting on. He tries to play dumb, asking if the orb is some kind of monster-catching ball like in the games. Jin-young tells him to quit the act, revealing he knows Hyeon joined the Special Ability Management team. The rival leader looks down at a digital tablet, showing that high-level intel is being shared among the elites of Zhongjin. Hyun laughs it off, asking what he should bet in return. Should he kneel if he loses? Jin Young gets serious, staring the MC down and stating his terms: 1 year. If Hyun loses, he has to join the Zhongjin Guild for a full year and strictly obey every order from the master. Hyun cracks his neck, asking if the guy is going to pull some dirty tricks to win. The rival hunter clenches his fist, promising to keep the match fair and square as a matter of pride. He claims his motto is honorable competition, but his smirk says otherwise. Hyun looks at the guy's 2 teammates, thinking it's pretty cheeky to bet his one-man show against their 3-man elite squad. The Solo Resurrection logo cracks again as the flashback ends and the hunt resumes. Morning breaks in the dungeon, and Hyun is letting out a massive yawn while his teammates pack up their gear. Dongwon looks at the MC one last time, his expression filled with genuine worry. He warns that the signal flares might not help because the other top-ranking guilds are too individualistic to actually save anyone. Hyun just waves him off with a grin, wishing the Vice Master good luck as he marches deeper into the green hell. Birds flee from the trees as a series of arrows thwip through the air. Another ambush has begun. Jin Young's team is under fire, and the report is grim: 3 injured and 2 dead in just a matter of minutes. The Zhongjin leader is furious, snapping an arrow in half as he tries to find the invisible enemy. He looks up and sees them, a species of tall, lithe lizard creatures known as Venandi Scouts. He realizes with horror that Venandi wasn't a boss name, it was a species, and they are hunting the humans like prey. His men are panicking, unable to track the scouts who are just hitting and running through the canopy. Jin Young looks up at the towering trees, his eyes turning cold and desperate. He decides that if the monsters are hiding in the forest, he'll just have to get rid of the forest itself. His team is terrified, warning that a massive fire could trap them too, but he doesn't care about their safety. He mocks his men for wanting to use signal flares, calling them idiots for thinking anyone is coming to help. To him, his guild's honor and the bet are worth more than the lives of his subordinates. The wind starts to howl through the leaves, a sound that signals a turn for the worse. He orders his mages to stand by, ready to unleash a firestorm the moment the wind blows east. His gaze is fixed on the trees, waiting for the perfect moment to burn the world down. Across the forest, the wind picks up speed, swirling through the battlefield. The Venandi scouts let out hissing screeches, their green scales blending perfectly with the leaves. Hyun stops, looking at the tactical lizardmen who are just watching them from the shadows. They aren't attacking yet, just panting and making a ha-hey-ay sound like they're laughing at the humans. Yuseong uses his intuition, realizing the scouts are sending a message: come any closer, and we'll end you. Hyun's aura flares up, a dark energy vibrating around his body as he prepares to break the stalemate. He starts the countdown, his voice low and dangerous as he signals his team to move. O-N-E! T-W-O! T-H-R-E-E! The trio rockets forward, Sunga firing mid-air as they charge the tree line. A scout's claws dig into the bark as it leaps away, faster than any monster they've faced so far. The lizard men are literally running up the vertical trunks, looking back at Hyun with mocking eyes. The MC skids to a halt as a series of traps click shut around him, the forest floor turning into a minefield. Sunga realizes these creatures have lost their fear because they think they've already won the psychological war. Yusong teases that maybe they're just scared of the boss's edgy biker jacket. Sunga worries it's a trap, but Hyun is already moving again, his eyes fixed on the retreating scouts. The fact that they are jumping away from this specific path means they are protecting something. The dungeon core is close. Yuseong's intuition tells him that something interesting is waiting for them if they keep going. Hyun overlooks the warning signs, his desire to finish the raid overriding his common sense for a moment. The interesting thing turns out to be a relentless swarm of scouts that keep peppering them with arrows and disappearing. Hyun is screaming "Yi-O-U fucker" at the canopy, his face red with rage as the lizardmen continue their hit-and-run tactics. One scout takes a direct hit from Sunga but just screeches and dives back into the brush. Hyun compares them to Teemo from League of Legends, annoying trap-setting rats that drive you insane. The trio stands in a clearing, surrounded by spent arrows, while the scouts let out a mocking, how anticlimactic hiss. An arrow grazes the MC's arm, a small fsh of blood showing they are slowly wearing him down. Hyun looks at the arrow in his arm, his expression shifting from anger to a cold, terrifying calm. He snaps the arrow in two with a single snap, realizing that playing by their rules isn't working. A manic, demonic grin stretches across his face as he comes up with a new plan. Just take hostages. He declares he doesn't care if he has to rip their claws out or skin them alive to get answers. The scouts look down, and for the first time, their laughter stops as they see the true monster in the skull jacket. The chapter ends with the badass guild, ready to show the Venandi scouts what real brutality looks like. In a dungeon designed to hunt humans like prey, the line between hero and monster starts to blur, and our boy is about to show everyone which side he's on. Our guy Hyon tries a new tactic, taking a lizardman hostage and threatening to end its life if the others don't back off. The other scouts just stare at each other in total confusion, having zero concept of mercy or negotiation. Hyon realizes his plan failed miserably as arrows start flying his way, while Yusong just laughs about the failed experiment. The trio is forced into a full-on sprint, dodging projectiles as Hyon curses Yusong for thinking this madness was a good idea. Hyon ducks into the brush, his eyes flashing with irritation at how ruthless these monsters actually are. Yuseong points out the obvious. These monsters don't care about their own kind, even killing the hostage just to get a clear shot. The MC realizes they need a new plan, but his thoughts are interrupted by something glowing in the sky. A red signal flare streaks through the air, signaling a life-or-death emergency nearby that the badass crew can't ignore. Hyon knows staying hidden won't solve anything, so they head toward the chaos as the title card, Solo Resurrection, drops. A goblin lets out a blast on a war horn, calling in the reserves for a total slaughter. The Guardian Guild is being absolutely crushed by a massive horde of ogres and goblins, with the Vice Master begging his men to hold out. Han Siwon screams that reinforcements are coming, trying to keep the hope alive for his dying guild members. But deep down, he knows the truth. In this forest of death, nobody is coming to save them. As an ogre looms over him, Siwon flashes back to when his guildmaster first started acting strange before mutating. He regrets not giving up on the raid sooner, realizing his pride has led his entire team into a meat grinder. He clenches his fist in the dirt, admitting that it wasn't about reputation, it was his own greed that dragged them here. He stands alone in a field of corpses, the weight of his guild members' lives crushing his spirit. A massive ogre fist slams into the ground, the shockwave nearly knocking the Vice Master off his feet. Looking into the eyes of the monsters, he accepts the end, whispering that his guild is finally done for. He's surrounded on all sides by towering giants, a one-man stand against a literal army of nightmares. Siwon collapses to his knees as the monsters close in for the kill, his shield broken and his hope gone. A massive blade descends toward his head, a lethal strike that he's too exhausted to dodge. Clang! The sound of metal on metal rings out as a flying shield deflects the ogre's weapon at the last second. An arrow pierces the ogre's throat with surgical precision, blood spraying across the forest floor. Siwon looks up in pure shock, his eyes widening as he realizes someone actually answered the flare. Hyon roars as he drops into the fray, activating Lion's Roar to nullify every monster's stealth and deception. He activates Giant's power, his muscles bulging as he prepares to show these ogres who the real monster is. He whips out Wolk's giant hammer, a D-rank relic with enough weight to flatten a building. The MC leaps into the air, a dark silhouette against the sky as he brings the hammer down in a massive arc. Boom! The impact turns the lead ogre into literal paste, the ground shattering under the force of the strike. Hyon doesn't stop, swinging the massive tool through the midsections of two more monsters with a single motion. Siwon watches in disbelief as Hyon casually obliterates the creatures that were about to end him. Yuseong and Sung-ah dive in as well, their mason arrows turning the goblin frontline into a messy graveyard. The Vice Master looks at the skull on Hyon's back, whispering the name of the badass guild like a prayer. Hyon stands over the bodies of three ogres, wiping blood from his face and wondering if these guys are actually supposed to be a challenge. Siwon realizes this man is on a level beyond anything he's ever seen from an ability user. But even with the MC's power, more monsters are emerging from the fog, and the situation is still looking grim. One of the survivors points toward the tree line, screaming that more hunters are approaching. The Dangun Guild arrives in full force, their flags waving as they charge in to support the survivors. Han Seon leads the charge, her presence alone sending a shockwave through the monster ranks. Siwon cries out in relief, unable to believe he's actually going to walk out of this forest alive. The smoke clears, revealing a forest floor littered with lizardmen and goblins as Hyan catches his breath. Han Seon approaches, noting that even though the dungeon is high rank, her guild hasn't lost a single member yet. She leads an elite unit of disciplined hunters, a sharp contrast to the broken guilds around them. Siwon is humiliated, noting that while his guild was wiped out, Badass is looking perfectly fine with only 3 people. He looks at the fallen bodies of his friends, the reality of the dungeon's brutality finally sinking in. Hyun yells at him to snap out of it, calling him Mr. Hyung to get his attention. The MC asks if he's just going to stand there like a statue while there's still work to be done. Hyun tells the survivors to gather up, announcing that it's time for a strategy meeting to find the core. Siwon can only nod, trailing behind the MC like a lost puppy as the power dynamic shifts completely. In the distance, the forest begins to glow with a terrifying orange light as a lizardman screeches in agony. Wu Jinyoung is panicking, screaming that the fire he started is out of control and the wind has changed direction. The Jungjin master stands before a wall of flames, realizing his clever plan has turned into a self-inflicted death sentence. His face is pale with terror as he realizes he might have just burned his own guild alive. He bellows for everyone to fall back, but the fire is already closing in, turning the forest into a furnace. As the sun sets, Hyan stands near the tree line, declaring that their next stop is the dungeon core. The group huddles around a campfire, with Seon pointing out that they don't even have a map or the core's location. Hyan casually points into the dark, telling them the core is right over there and isn't even that far away. Seon is stunned that he can sense core energy from this distance, something even high-rank mages struggle with. Based on his experience in the tutorial, Hyan predicts they'll reach the heart of the dungeon by midnight. The Donggun Guild is ready to move immediately, their professionalism shining through even in the face of disaster. But Siwon holds up a trembling hand, begging them to wait just a little longer. He tries to laugh it off, saying they've just finished a massive battle and need to rest. Seon looks at him with cold eyes, reminding him that the Venandi monsters are smart and won't give them a break. Siwon pleads for just a short rest, his spirit clearly broken by the losses he's suffered. The Donggun rep mentions they have a healer to recover fatigue, but Siwon looks at his bandaged men and knows they've reached their limit. He admits through grit teeth that his guild members are physically and mentally done for. Hyan ignores the complaining, acting like he can't even hear the Vice Master's excuses because the air is too stuffy. He leans back, asking Siwon why he's so tense when they've already survived the worst of it. Siwon is offended by the MC's casual attitude, asking if Hyan really expects them to keep moving in this state. Hyan gets real with him, telling him to get his head straight. This is a dungeon where the weak simply die. He bluntly points out that the Guardian Guild almost died because they were weak, and they only survived because Badass intervened. He asks Siwon why he even came if he was just going to stand around being useless instead of finding a solution. The harsh truth hits Siwon like a physical blow, leaving him speechless and humiliated. Hyan stands up, clicking his tongue and suggesting they at least grab a quick meal before the final push. All that talking made the MC hungry, and his stomach is more important than anyone's feelings. The night erupts into violence as the combined guilds carve a path through the forest under a blood-red moon. Hyan takes the lead, punching through lizardmen and telling everyone to focus on clearing a path rather than killing every single monster. Siwon finds his second wind, following the MC's wake as they charge toward the glowing center of the forest. They burst into a clearing and find it, the massive, glowing orb of the dungeon core sitting atop a stone pedestal. Seon is amazed they actually found it, immediately ordering her team to fire every signal flare they have. A flare gun is loaded, the metallic click sounding like a victory bell. Multiple flares shoot into the sky, red, purple, and green lights painting the clouds as hunters all over the forest see the signal. In a different sector, another guildmaster curses, realizing they're a step late to the party. Reinforcements from the Immortal Guild, Black Knights, and the Ability Users Alliance flood the area, all eager for a piece of the final loot. The weary hunters cheer as the massive army of humans finally reunites to take down the boss. Sunga snipes a scout that was lunging for Hyan, her focus never wavering even in the chaos. The ground trembles as a massive, scaly foot slams down, dwarfing the regular monsters. It's the boss, Venandi's great warrior, a towering beast wreathed in purple mana that makes even the veterans freeze. The beast leaps with a ground-shaking crack, its weapon ready to cleave the human line in two. Hyan doesn't flinch, launching himself into the air and using a magic platform to gain height. He screams DIE as he brings his hammer down with everything he's got. Ka-chwack! The hammer connects with the boss's skull, blood and teeth flying as the great warrior is humbled in a single strike. Hyon lands casually, looking at the twitching body and wondering why the boss was so incredibly weak. He realizes that the dungeon's true difficulty wasn't the boss, it was the sheer intelligence and number of the monsters. The loot drops, a sword of Venandi's great warrior, a D-rank blade that's light but surprisingly sharp. Hyon picks up the massive sword and a bow, looking at them with a bored expression. He decides the sword is too big to be useful, looking over at a dead scout like it's a piece of trash. He slams a spear into a monster's head, declaring that the fight is officially over. But the victory feels hollow as Siwon looks around, realizing they lost way too many good people to get this far. Rain starts to fall over the field of corpses, a somber moment of silence for those who didn't make it. The other guild leaders start talking about distributing the loot, acting like the danger has passed. Sunga's eyes widen as she looks toward the horizon, her sniper's vision catching something terrifying. A massive wall of fire is sweeping over the mountains, the entire dungeon being consumed by the Jungjin Guild's blaze. The hunters are confused, wondering how a fire could spread this fast without any external mana. A screaming Wu Jinyong bursts out of the smoke, running for his life as a fire tornado chases him. Hyon looks on in pure disbelief, wondering if this guy is actually serious with this level of incompetence. The firemaster is weeping, begging for help as he realizes the monsters he tried to burn are now driving him into the flames. The fire tornado is a literal wall of death, and the badass crew watches as the Jungjin Guild master leads a stampede toward them. One of the survivors is hyperventilating, realizing that there's nowhere left to run in this burning forest. The dungeon core sits behind them, glowing with a dangerous heat as the fire approaches. A panicking hunter screams that he's going to destroy the core so they can escape through the gate immediately. A Donggoon member stops him, warning that destroying the core now would trigger a break that could end the world. The hunters are losing it, screaming for a way out while the inferno turns the sky into a hellish red. The Donggoon rep explains that monsters in extreme fear will try to escape through the portal, and without a core to regulate it, they'll flood into Earth. A vision of Seoul shows the peaceful city right outside the gate, totally unaware that an army of burning monsters is about to land on their doorstep. The panicking hunters form a line, ready to smash the core and save themselves, even if it means sacrificing the city. Han Seon steps in, her voice booming as she asks if they're really prepared to threaten their own allies just to survive. She reminds them that they are the only ones standing between this disaster and the center of Seoul. The cowards don't care, leaping forward to destroy the pedestal, but Seon isn't letting them pass. A flash of energy cuts through the air. Hyon has seen enough of this honor among thieves nonsense. The MC drops from the sky, literally kicking a hunter mid-air and landing between the cowards and the core. He lands with a heavy thud, the grass around his feet charring as his aura begins to boil. He asks a simple question, so we just have to protect the core? Seon confirms it, noting that the monsters are running from the fire and will only attack if someone blocks their exit. Hyon thinks it's a long shot, but a dark, confident smirk starts to form on his face. He tells the others to just handle the small fries that slip past him. He's going to take on the entire stampede himself. Dongwon tries to help, but Hyon tells him to stay back, his voice dripping with absolute authority. "You'll just get in the way," he tells the vice master, his body beginning to glow with a menacing red light. He stacks his skills, Power of the Giant and Wayne's secret skill activate simultaneously, his veins pulsing with raw power. Berserker mode kicks in, his eyes turning into predatory slits as he prepares to fight for real. He stands alone against the horizon of fire and monsters, looking like a god of war ready to defend his territory. Sunga asks if he's doing this on instinct again, and Yusong just shrugs, knowing their boss is about to do something legendary. A massive pack of lizardmen and ogres charges toward the core, their eyes filled with blind, burning panic. Hyon meets them head-on, his red eyes glowing through the smoke like twin stars of destruction. He becomes a blur of violence, his hammer and fists turning the stampede into a corridor of blood and broken bone. The other hunters watch in absolute awe, as one man literally holds back the weight of an entire dungeon. A few monsters try to slip past the MC, and Hyon yells for the others to do their jobs and clean up his mess. Sion leads the defense of the secondary line, her guild members finally finding their courage. A lizardman lunges for Siwon, but the vice master holds his ground, finally acting like the leader his men need. Dongwon spears a monster with a nice defense, the teamwork between the guilds finally clicking. Sunga draws her bow, the sun setting behind her as she locks on to a high-rank target. Her arrow streaks through the air, a beam of light that pierces a monster's eye with a satisfying whack. She doesn't stop, firing again and again with lethal speed and pinpoint accuracy. A massive ogre's head snaps back as her arrow sinks deep into its skull, ending its charge instantly. Yusong cheers for her, swinging his mace and crushing everything within arm's reach. He spins into a death whirlwind, his weapon leaving trails of purple energy as he laughs through the carnage. The psycho is in his element, blood splattering his face as he enjoys the most fun he's had since the tutorial. He feels the power flowing through him, noting that this is the feeling of a true life-or-death struggle. But a sudden, high-speed arrow from the shadows catches Sung-ah off guard, piercing her chest as Yuseong screams her name in horror. One man stood against an entire army to save his friends, but even a monster who can't die has his breaking point. Now, the world is finding out that poking the badass guild is the last mistake anyone will ever make. The silence is shattered as a high-speed arrow rips through the air, plunging deep into Sung-ah's shoulder and sending her crashing to the ground. Hyeon's eyes instantly ignite with a terrifying red glow as he realizes his friend has been sniped from the shadows. Before he can even process the rage, a massive goblin lunges at him with its jaws wide open, screaming for blood. Hyeon doesn't even flinch, his face a mask of cold fury as he prepares to tear the monster apart. He watches the monster fall with a dull thud, but he's disgusted with himself. Even if he's low on mana, letting a low-level goblin get the jump on him is a joke he isn't laughing at. He reaches out, his hand glowing with a sinister red aura as he feels his blood boiling. He catches a glimpse of the monsters surrounding them and knows he has to end this now. A twisted, manic grin spreads across Hyeon's face as he looks at the blood on his hands. It's been a while since he's felt a challenge this fresh, and he's starting to enjoy the chaos. He unleashes a massive horizontal slash, a wave of dark energy tearing through the air and drenching the battlefield in blood. With a heavy crunch, Hyeon slams his weapon into a giant monster, the impact so powerful it sends shockwaves through the dirt. Suddenly, a piercing scream rings out, and Hyeon's head snaps toward the sound, his eyes wide with sudden realization. Sung-ah is pinned to the ground, another arrow lodged in her chest as a monster looms over her with its teeth bared. A flash of blue light cuts through the darkness, decapitating the monster in a single clean stroke before it can land a hit. Hyeon is a blur of motion, spinning through the horde and leaving a trail of severed limbs and black blood in his wake as he rushes to Sung-ah's side. But the enemies aren't stopping. A lizardman warrior launches a spear with pinpoint accuracy, driving the rusted tip straight through Hyeon's chest. He coughs up a spray of blood, a bitter smile on his face as he realizes his attempt to be clever with his remaining mana backfired. The lizardman looks on in shock as Hyeon ignores the spear in his ribs, his Entria's hide skill deactivating as he focuses everything into one last move. "Mana burst," he whispers, and the air around him begins to crackle with an unstable, explosive energy. Boom! A massive pillar of blue light erupts, vaporizing every monster within a 20-yard radius in a blinding flash of power. His hand is scorched and skeletal, smoke rising from his skin as he forces his broken body to keep moving. Standing amidst the rubble with a spear still sticking out of his chest, Hyeon calmly asks Sung-ah if she's okay, his voice steady despite the lethal wounds. Sung-ah looks up in horror, barely able to speak his name, but he just brushes it off, telling her they can talk about it later. His footsteps are heavy as he trudges through the blood-soaked grass, reminding her that they're running out of time. He checks her injuries and tells her that since her legs still work, she needs to get out of here immediately. He's not just telling her to run, he needs her to deliver a message to the Dangun Guildmaster to get everyone else out too. Sung-ah is desperate, shouting back that she can't leave him behind, but the look in his eyes stops her cold. Hyeon turns back with a confident smirk, the sunset flaming behind him as he asks her if he looks like someone who's actually going to die. She stares at him, her heart heavy with a mix of fear and absolute trust in the man who has survived the impossible. She finally nods, turning and sprinting toward the exit as fast as her injured body will allow. Hyeon gathers a ball of pure mana in his palm, the blue light reflecting in his cold, determined eyes. He dives back into the horde, a whirlwind of destruction as he clears a path and screams for the monsters to bring it on. "Mana burst!" he roars, detonating his energy one more time to buy the others every second they need. The forest fire is closing in, the heat turning the air into a furnace as the flames begin to consume everything. The ground is littered with the corpses of monsters, their blood sizzling against the scorched earth. Hyan stands alone before a glowing interface, the fire reflecting in his eyes as he prepares for the final act. He stares up at the blood-red moon through the smoke, the spear in his back a grim reminder of the price of this victory. Deep in the forest, the dungeon core pulses with an eerie light, the heartbeat of the gate that must be destroyed. Back at the defense line, the hunters are panicking, screaming that they need to destroy the core and escape before the fire swallows them. Han Seon stands frozen, watching the inferno and realizing that Kang Hyeon is still trapped somewhere inside that hell. Suddenly, a scout rushes up to her, shouting her name and desperate to deliver a message. Sunga arrives, breathless and bleeding, telling Seon that Hyeon's order is for everyone to evacuate the second they see the signal. Seon starts to ask what the signal is, but she's interrupted by a flash so bright it blurs her vision. A system notification pops up, the dungeon's main core has been destroyed, and the portal to the outside is finally opening. She stares in disbelief, realizing that the signal was the sound of the entire dungeon collapsing under Hyan's power. Inside the burning woods, Hyan waves a hand through the smoke, his body battered but his spirit unbroken as the core shatters behind him. Seon lets out a breath she didn't know she was holding, a small, impressed smile touching her lips as the exit gate stabilizes. She realizes that the only thing standing in the way of their survival was the core itself, and Hyan just smashed it like it was nothing. She takes command, shouting for everyone to move out, while Sunga keeps looking back into the flames, screaming Hyan's name. Yuseong grabs her, telling her she's being crazy, and that in her condition, she's just going to be a burden. He shouts at her to have some faith, reminding her that Hyung is on a completely different level from everyone else. Sunga pauses, the weight of his words sinking in as she remembers all the times Hyan has come back from the brink. She closes her eyes, finally relenting and letting the others lead her toward the portal. The hunters emerge into the city streets, looking like they've been through a literal war as they stumble out of the gate. Jo Dongwon looks back at the closing portal, his face etched with worry for the man who saved his guild's life. Seon stands with her arms crossed, her eyes fixed on the gate, waiting for the one person who hasn't come out yet. Suddenly, the ground shakes with a heavy thud, and a giant shadow looms over the exit. Everyone gasps as Hyan finally steps through, his back turned to them, looking like a ghost rising from the ash. Sunga's face lights up with joy, but as she gets closer, her expression turns to one of pure shock. Hyan is standing perfectly still, but his eyes are vacant. The hunters realize with horror that he's actually fainted while standing up. Yuseong walks up casually and reaches out, giving Hyeon a tiny, playful poke on the back of his head. With that one touch, Hyeon's balance gives out and he collapses face first onto the pavement, his body finally shutting down. The others scream at Yuseong, but he just shrugs, his gut feeling telling him that Hyan has already won. Even unconscious and covered in blood, Hyan looks peaceful, a champion who gave everything to make sure his people made it home. Outside the gate, Jo Dongwon is absolutely losing it, grabbing a cowardly guild leader by the throat and screaming that they almost died because of his incompetence. He lifts the man off the ground, his eyes glowing with rage as he asks how someone so pathetic could even call themselves a guild master. Meanwhile, the others are crowded around Hyan on the ground, frantically checking to see if he's still breathing. Hyan slowly opens his eyes and cracks a smirk, apologizing for interrupting the drama, but making it clear he's still in the game. He looks toward the cowardly leader and demands he hand over the item immediately, his voice cold as ice even while he's bleeding out. But the adrenaline finally fails him, his vision blurring as he lets out one last breath and falls back into unconsciousness. The screen fades to black as the chaos of the raid finally comes to a close. Hyan wakes up in a clean hospital bed, groaning in pain and clutching his head as the reality of his injuries hits him like a truck. Sunga instantly lunges at him, wrapping him in a tearful hug that almost knocks the wind out of him all over again. He winces, telling her to take it easy since he's still sore, while his IV drips rattle against the pole. A news report flashes on the screen. Korea's first C-rank dungeon, the Forest of Banandi, has finally been cleared, though the cost was high. The Guardian Guild is in shambles, having lost their leader and 50% of their members in the slaughter. The Hwyong Guild is also facing a national scandal, their leaders forced to bow in an apology press conference for endangering the entire raid. Internet forums are exploding with hate, with people calling for the Hwyong leader's license to be revoked and mocking them for getting wrecked. But amidst the hate, the Bide Guild is the name on everyone's lips. The tiny three-member group has officially rocketed into the top 10. Of course, not everyone is a fan. Trolls are already calling them overhyped one-trick wonders compared to Han Seon. Hyeon stares at his phone, scrolling through the sea of comments and toxic hate with a completely indifferent look. Back at the guild office, Yuseong is lounging on the couch with a beer, noticing that Sung-ah is glued to her phone again. She's furiously typing back at the trolls, telling Yuseong she's just giving some internet punks a much-needed lesson in manners. Yuseong just laughs and takes a long swig of his drink, calling her way too nosy for her own good. He offers her a drink to cool off, but she's too busy keyboard warring to even acknowledge him. Sung-ah eventually sighs, looking worried and mentioning that Hyeon's hospital discharge is taking way too long. Yuseong isn't worried at all. He knows Hyeon is a regeneration monster who probably fully healed the very first day. He jokes that if you cut Hyeon in half, he'd probably just turn into two separate versions of himself, which leaves Sung-ah looking totally confused. He slams his empty can down and complains about being bored, realizing that maybe a little downtime isn't actually a good thing for a psycho like him. He suggests throwing daggers at a target to pass the time, and Sung-ah finally agrees just to get off the internet. Across the office, we see the lone salaryman, Jae-moon, buried under a mountain of paperwork at his desk. He's muttering under his breath, wondering if those two would ever think about helping out with the actual guild work. The requests for memberships, ads, and sponsorships are piling up so high he hasn't slept in days. His eyes go wide as he realizes something is seriously wrong. The volume of work is becoming a nightmare. The door clicks open, and Hyeon walks in casually, wearing his leather jacket and asking how everyone's been. He takes one look at the messy office and jokes that the place went to hell the second he left. Jae-moon is overjoyed to see him, and Hyeon tells him he can just call him Jae-moon comfortably from now on. Hyeon starts to say something else, but his eyes drift toward the cluttered workspace. He tells Jae-moon to clean his desk because the mess is distracting, leaving the poor guy looking absolutely soul-crushed. Jae-moon tries to defend himself, admitting his desk is a mess but suggesting Hyeon look at the rest of the room first. He points to the coffee table covered in trash and empty cans, shouting that if anyone needs to clean up, it's the other two! Jae-moon looks like he's about to have a mental breakdown, wondering if he should just quit this crazy guild right now. Hyeon just stares at him blankly, not quite getting why his manager is vibrating with rage. He eventually mumbles that he'll clean it when he has time, while Jae-moon realizes Hyeon is someone you just can't win an argument with. Hyeon turns to Sung-ah and pulls out a massive green-wrapped item, telling her he forgot to give it to her earlier. It's the bow of the Banandi Warchief, a C-rank relic from the dungeon boss that creates arrows out of pure mana. Sung-ah's eyes sparkle as she takes the legendary weapon, and Hyeon tells her he knew she'd be the one to use it best. She pulls the string and gasps as a glowing mana arrow forms instantly, her face turning bright red with excitement. She bows deeply in thanks, while Yuseong watches from the background, wondering when he's going to get his loot. Hyeon just gives Yuseong the middle finger, jokingly asking what's so great about him that he deserves a gift. Yuseong pouts, saying he worried about him so much, but Hyeon calls him out, knowing he just sat around drinking beer the whole time. A loud ding-dong echoes through the office, and Hyeon looks toward the intercom, wondering who would be visiting their guild. A blurry face appears on the screen, a man looking hesitant and asking if this is the Bide office. Hyeon answers through the speaker, and the man identifies himself as Han Siwon from the Guardian Guild. Siwon asks if Hyeon remembers him, his face looking hopeful through the grainy camera. Hyeon bluntly says, "Nope, don't know you," and hangs up the intercom without a second thought. He turns back to the others, complaining that weirdos just keep showing up at their door. Outside, Siwon is left standing in the hallway, staring at the silent intercom in total shock. He's devastated, wondering how Hyeon could seriously not remember the guy he saved in the woods. The sun sets over the city as Siwon stands there, feeling like a complete nobody. He mutters to himself about how they raided together, and how Hyeon even yelled at him. He looks like a rejected puppy as he stands in front of the door, unable to process the MC's absolute lack of interest. Eventually, they let him in, and Siwon introduces himself as the acting guild master of the Guardian Guild, trying to sound professional. Hyeon is casually drinking a beer, finally admitting it's not their first time meeting but still looking completely unimpressed. He offers Siwon a can, but the guy declines, looking judged as he stares at the pile of alcohol on the table. Siwon is internally screaming, wondering what kind of top-tier guild drinks in the office in broad daylight. He looks over at Yuseong and Sung-ah practicing their aim in the corner and realizes this whole guild is just a group of high-level weirdos. Hyeon asks what brings him here, while Jaemun screams from his desk that he's the only one actually working around here. Siwon bows deeply, saying he came specifically to thank Hyeon for saving his life during the raid. Hyeon has a sudden flashback to the raid, remembering a pathetic guy whining about how he couldn't go back. "Ah, I remember now!" Hyeon shouts, finally making the connection. He bluntly reminds Siwon that he was the one crying like a baby back then, causing the guy to cough up a metaphorical lung in embarrassment. Siwon just laughs it off, saying it's been a while Siwon tries to regain some shred of his dignity. The doorbell rings again, and Hyeon grumbles about why so many people are bothering them today. He orders Jaemun to go check it, and the poor manager curses under his breath as he gets up yet again. Jaemun looks at the screen, and his eyes nearly pop out of his head. He stammers that Hyeon needs to see this himself, his voice shaking with urgency. Hyeon walks over to the monitor, and the mood in the room shifts instantly. On the screen is Jo Dongwon, but he's covered in blood and barely standing, looking like he crawled through hell to get to their door. They rush him inside, and he gasps out a thank you as they open up a first aid kit to treat his wounds. Hyeon leans in, his face serious as he asks what the hell happened to his friend. Dongwon reminds him that he's the one who bought him beef before, and he's clearly here because Hyeon is the only one he can trust. Hyeon smirks, saying of course he remembers the guy who paid for dinner, which makes Siwon realize just how simple the MC's priorities are. Hyeon asks why he didn't just go to a hospital if he was this badly hurt. Dongwon's hand trembles as he reaches out, whispering that he has a desperate request. He forces himself upright, looking Hyeon in the eye with a look of pure desperation. "Please save my brother!" he begs, leaving everyone in the room stunned. Hyeon sits him down and asks for the full story, wanting to confirm if his older brother was really kidnapped. Dongwon confirms it, saying his brother Jo Sung-chan is the actual guild master of the Hyeon Guild. He explains that they built the guild together, but Hyeon cuts him off, wanting to know if the kidnappers were from the Jongja Guild. Sung-ah corrects him, saying it's the Jongjin Guild, but Hyeon just shrugs. To him, any group that wrecked his car door doesn't deserve a real name. Dongwon clenches his fist, the memory of the attack clearly haunting him as he starts to explain how it all went wrong. He says they were in an all-out war with the Jongjin Guild, but the odds were stacked against them. He reminds Hyeon about the drug that enhances superpowers, the same one they heard about before. Against those powered-up monsters, his guild was completely helpless, their members slaughtered in a one-sided massacre. The screen fades into a dark, grim atmosphere as the weight of the loss settles over them. Dozens of his men died that day, and Dongwon's voice cracks as he describes the devastation. He explains that even after the slaughter they kidnapped his brother, and Hyeon asks why the police haven't stepped in yet. Yusong pipes up, reminding them that dungeons are practically outside the law, and the authorities turn a blind eye to hunter conflicts. Hyeon wonders why Jongjin is going this far. Did they have some ancient blood feud or something? Dongwon says they didn't even have a grudge before, but ever since those guys started taking that drug, they became insanely violent. Hyeon touches his chin, thinking about the promise he made and how suspicious this drug sounds. "All right, let's head out right now," Hyeon declares, and Dongwon nearly breaks down in gratitude. They head down to the basement level, the badass trio walking with a purpose that means trouble for someone. Yusong jokes that they need to avenge their dear Poppy as they head toward their vehicle. Hyeon looks confused, asking who the hell Poppy is. Yusong points to their guild van, which is now covered in badass graffiti and skull decals. Hyeon looks like he wants to scrap the whole thing on the spot. Yuseong thinks it looks cool, but Hyeon just calls him a dumbass as they load up. Hyeon notices Siwon is still following them and asks why he hasn't gone home yet. Siwon stammers, saying the Guardian Guild exists to protect humanity, and he wants to help. He's clearly trying to act tough to impress them, but Hyeon just gives him a blank, look. Siwon mentions that their old guildmaster said there was a connection between the drugs and the mutation virus at the last raid meeting. Hyeon's eyes sharpen as he realizes this might be bigger than just a guild war. Siwon is internally cheering, realizing his random fact actually got the MC's attention. Hyeon admits it sounds reasonable, and the team prepares to hunt down the Jongjin leader. Cut to the Jongjin Guild headquarters, a massive skyscraper with the master's face plastered on a giant screen. Inside, a secretary informs the master that Jo Dongwon has contacted the Baeid Guild. The Jongjin master swivels his chair around with a glass of wine, a twisted smile on his face as he hears the name Kang Haeon. He remembers Hyon as the bastard who beat up his guild members before, and his eyes start to glow with a dark, unstable energy. He crushes the wine glass in his bare hand, blood and glass shards flying everywhere as he laughs manically. He decides it's the perfect time to take care of that piece of trash once and for all. When the law turns a blind eye to a city rotting from the inside, the only way to fix it is to let a monster off his leash. Kang Haeon is done playing by the rules, and the Jongjin Guild is about to find out that some people are more dangerous than the monsters in the gates. The badass van speeds down the highway, looking like a rolling nightmare with its new skull decals. Han Si-won is gripping the steering wheel for dear life, wondering why he's the one driving this absolute delinquent mobile while the others relax. Hyon looks out the window, his mind already 3 steps ahead as they prepare to hit the Jongjin Guild where it hurts. Dongwon is still shaken, confirming that the monster-powered drug is definitely what's giving the Jongjin hunters their unnatural, aggressive edge. Siwon is nervous, asking if the 5 of them are really just going to charge in alone, but Hyun just smirks and starts tapping on his phone. He tells them not to worry because he's got connections, and we see his phone calling a very important government contact. In a quiet office filled with books, Mr. Tegel looks down at his vibrating phone, his face paling when he sees it's the badass guildmaster calling. Hyun greets him with a cheerful, almost mischievous tone, acting like they're old friends catching up. He cuts straight to the point, asking Tegel if he's heard of the monster-powered drug that's flooding the streets. Tegel is confused at first, but Hyun explains it's basically a performance-enhancing drug for hunters that turns them into ticking time bombs. The government official sighs, admitting that the rumors of Jongjin becoming a drug den have been crossing his desk for a while. Hyun's grin widens as he tells Tegel they're already at a Jongjin site and asks how many men the government can send for backup. Tegel is horrified, yelling through the phone that they can't just raid a top guild without a mountain of legal procedures. He's practically pulling his hair out, explaining that procedure is everything and they can't just act on a whim. He tells Hyun that most of their manpower is currently tied up handling the aftermath of the Benandi Forest terrorism incident. Hyun just sighs and hangs up mid-sentence, realizing the government is too slow to handle a problem that needs a hammer. He doesn't give up, instantly dialing another number to see if the Hunter Union has any more backbone. The Union contact picks up, sounding surprised, but happy to hear from the man who cleared a C-rank gate solo. Hyun plays it cool, calling the man Hyung and acting like he's just checking in on a friend. As the van crosses a bridge over a sparkling river, the conversation turns sour. The Union rep explains that while they know about the conflict, the Union has a strict non-interference policy when it comes to guild disputes. Yuseong is in the back playing a handheld game, mocking Hyun for having connections that are basically useless. Dongwon looks defeated, thinking that without official support, their mission is basically a suicide run. Hyun puts his phone away, a dark look crossing his face as he reminds them that he's taken down a guild all by himself before. A brief flashback shows a man in a ski mask, a reminder of the Bait Guild that Hyun dismantled with cold-blooded efficiency. He pulls up a list of Jongjin-owned dungeons on his phone, his eyes lighting up with a predatory spark as he picks their first target. They arrive at the Village of the Dead, a low-level E-rank dungeon that's usually ignored by top hunters. Normally, undead dungeons are trash, but the monsters here drop precious metals, making it a cash cow for the Jongjin Guild. The entrance is shrouded in a thick, unnatural fog that would make any normal person turn back in fear. 2 Jongjin guards stand outside a small shack, looking bored and completely unaware of the storm that's about to hit them. Inside, a burly Jongjin manager is screaming at his hunters, calling them lazy and pampered for not meeting their quota. The hunters look exhausted, one of them staring at the floor as the manager threatens to cut their food supply. One hunter mutters a curse, saying they need the drugs just to have the energy to hunt in this godforsaken place. Another hunter whispers that the manager only got his job because he's a drug pusher, not because he's actually a good leader. Suddenly, one of them spots several dark silhouettes moving through the fog in the distance. The manager doesn't notice, casually lighting a cigarette and acting like he's the king of this little hill. He keeps complaining about how useless his men are, even as his lighter starts flickering out. He throws the lighter on the ground in a huff, his anger making him completely oblivious to the silence falling over the woods. He pulls the curtain back, asking if anyone has a light, but he's met with a chilling void. The entire camp is eerily quiet, the only sound being the wind whistling through the dead trees. He looks around in confusion, wondering where the hell his lookout and the rest of his men disappeared to. Panicking, he draws a small dagger, his hands shaking as the fog starts to feel like it's closing in on him. He wonders if a monster managed to slip past the gate, his eyes darting toward a movement in the trees. An owl hoots from a branch, its yellow eyes watching him like he's already dead. Suddenly, the air is filled with a chaotic mess of whispering sounds, a psychological attack that starts to break his sanity. He starts laughing manically, a sign that the monster power in his system is reacting to the intense fear. He screams that he's not scared of an E-rank dungeon, his face twisting into a mask of pure terror. He roars for the fur to come out and fight, his eyes bulging as the whispering voices get louder and louder. A close-up of a single, glowing eye in the darkness suggests that the predator has finally found its prey. The manager stands frozen in the middle of the camp, his shadow long and jagged against the dirt. He feels a cold presence right behind his neck, a sweat drop rolling down his terrified face. He spins around and slashes at the darkness, but there's absolutely nothing there. He looks toward the piles of skulls on the ground, wondering if he's finally lost his mind. He mumbles, "What?" to himself, the silence now so heavy it feels like it's crushing his chest. Suddenly, Hyon's face appears right in front of his, a terrifying, wide-toothed grin that looks more demonic than any monster in the dungeon. A blood-curdling scream rips through the forest, scaring a flock of birds into the gray sky. Back at the Jongjin headquarters, a female member looks down in horror at the scene before her. The hunters from the village are huddled in a corner, shivering and traumatized, completely unable to speak or even make eye contact. The Jongjin master, Hong Cheon, asks how an E-rank dungeon could possibly break elite hunters like this. The subordinate hands her a crumpled, blood-stained piece of paper that the monsters left behind. Cheon reads the note, her face hardening as she sees the terrible handwriting and the even worse message. The note is a declaration of war. Your dungeon is now ours. If you want it back, hand over Jo Sungchan and all your drugs, or we take your dungeons one by one. She stares at the note in stunned silence, unable to believe someone would have the balls to threaten her guild like this. She looks out the window at the city, wondering what kind of gangsters she's actually dealing with. Under the full moon, the village of the dead has become the new temporary base for the badass guild. Inside the tent, the atmosphere is surprisingly chill. Sung-ah is eating a burger, while Yuseong is lounging on a bed playing his games. Hyon is drinking a lukewarm soda, complaining that he should probably learn ice magic just to keep his drinks cold. Siwon and Dongwon are staring at them in disbelief, wondering how these people can be so relaxed in the middle of a guild war. Siwon finally snaps, asking if they seriously don't feel any tension at all right now. Hyon just gives him a calm look, telling him it's fine, and that everything is going according to plan. He points out that they even sent a polite letter to the Jongjin master, so there's no reason to be stressed. Suddenly, several dark figures approach the tent, their shadows stretching across the canvas. Hyon's eyes narrow as he realizes the Jongjin gentlemen have finally arrived to negotiate. The tent flap opens, and a group of cloaked figures enters, one of them carrying a heavy sack over his shoulder. The lead figure drops the sack with a dull thud, revealing the battered body of a man inside. Dongwon's heart stops as he recognizes the man being tossed onto the dirt like trash. It's his brother, Jo Sungchan, covered in blood and barely conscious as he groans in pain. Hyon steps forward, his voice cold as he asks the cloaked leader if he's forgetting the other part of their deal. The figure mutters that the medicine is in his pocket, his voice muffled by a bandage on his face. Hyon reaches into the man's pocket and pulls out a small blister pack. He holds up the 4 red and white capsules, a look of pure disappointment on his face. Hyon asks if they're joking, reminding the messenger that he told them to hand over all of their drugs, not just a sample. The Jongjin lackey starts shouting, telling Hyon he has no idea how expensive those pills are or who he's talking to. Suddenly, the leader starts trembling, his hood falling back to reveal a face covered in surgical tape. It's Wu Jin-young, the Vice Guild Master, and he looks like he's having a panic attack, just standing near Hyon. Hyon recognizes him instantly, giving him a mocking "oh" as he remembers their previous encounter. Jin-young tries to act tough, telling himself there's nothing to be afraid of, but his body is failing him. He suddenly snaps and orders his men to get him, but the order is drowned out by a blur of movement. Yuseong is already in the middle of them, a manic grin on his face as he prepares to deliver a beatdown. The solo resurrection title card flashes as the real fight begins. Back at the Zhongjin office, a secretary reports that all 50 members sent to the dungeon, including the vice master, have returned combat disabled. She explains that some of them are barely clinging to life, the injuries so severe they might never hunt again. The master, Hong Chaeyeon, asks why, with a voice so quiet it's terrifying. She starts spiraling, her mind filled with a chaotic mess of thoughts about how she gave them everything and they still failed. Her eyes turn a deep, glowing red, the monster power in her blood finally overriding her logic. She turns to her manager, asking what he thinks of this pathetic situation. The poor man can only stutter out an apology as he watches his master's sanity slip away. Chaeyeon lets out a primal scream, smashing her desk and throwing her furniture across the room in a blind rage. She's hysterical, screaming WY over and over as she destroys her own office. Her face is a mask of pure, drug-induced madness as she roars into the air. The manager watches from the shadows, realizing that the drug has completely changed her. A visual of the monster power capsule dissolving into her blood shows the literal poison that's driving her crazy. He realizes with a sinking heart that everyone in the guild is losing their minds, becoming monsters in human skin. Chaeyeon suddenly stops, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper as she calls the manager's name. She orders him to empty the guild vault and buy every single monster power pill available on the black market. The manager tries to protest, but one look at her glowing red eyes and bulging veins tells him that he has no choice. "It's time for a real war," she declares, the city lights reflecting in her twisted gaze. She stares out the broken window, muttering Kang Hyun's name and wondering what his true goal is. She thinks to herself that his actions make no sense. Why provoke a war just for a hostage he already rescued? She looks at a shattered vase on the floor, the realization that Hyeon is playing a much deeper game starting to haunt her. She narrows her eyes, determined to figure out his purpose before his scheme swallows her whole. The sun rises over the city, casting a long shadow from the Zhongjin skyscraper. She pauses, a sudden realization hitting her like a physical blow. She wonders if going to war like this is exactly what Hyeon wants her to do. She looks around her ruined office, wondering if this entire madness was part of his plan from the start. She grits her teeth, knowing that if she doesn't figure out his goal soon, she's already lost. Her face is a mask of grim determination as she prepares for the final showdown. Cut to a high-end hospital building, birds chirping peacefully in the morning air. Inside, a nurse is checking a patient's blood pressure, noting that everything seems normal. She tells the patient they have one more healer treatment in the afternoon before leaving the room. The patient is Woo Jin-young, and he is covered head to toe in bandages, looking like a literal mummy. He stares at the ceiling, the silence of the room allowing him to finally piece together Hyeon's true goal. He remembers the beatdown Yoo-seong gave him, the psycho laughing as he told Jin-young that his hits felt chewy. Jin-young lets out a disturbing, toothless giggle, his mind finally breaking as he realizes Hyeon just wanted to pick a fight to get the evidence he needed. The realization that they were just pawns in the MC's game is the final straw for his sanity. The scene shifts to a fantasy-style prologue for a game called Vera, a realm on the edge of annihilation. It describes a world of floating islands and crystal rivers currently under siege by shadow creatures. The ad shows royal lizardmen and cute beasts, a stark contrast to the gritty drug war happening in the main story. It encourages readers to play the game at the Scanlator's website to discover the world. Back to the real story, we see a close-up of Hong Chaeyeon's furious face, her rage still burning hot. She throws a red Zhongjin flag to the ground, declaring an all-out war against the badass guild. A narrator mentions that what could have been a legendary war in Korea's dungeon history never actually began in the way anyone expected. Hyeon is lounging on a couch in his messy office, looking completely unbothered by the fact that a top guild wants him dead. He's holding a glowing blue orb, examining it with a curious look. It's an Easter egg item from the administrator, a mysterious artifact that activates upon destruction. He senses a connection to the godlike entity that ran the tutorial, but he's not sure how to use it yet. He tosses the item onto the table as Yoo-seong walks in, shouting "Bro!" and asking what happened with their latest plan. Yoo-seong points out it's been 2 weeks since they wrecked the Zhongjin guys and there's been zero reaction from them. Hyeon just closes his eyes, saying that they're probably on the verge of a total collapse right now. The scene cuts to a government building, where Hyeon has been called for an urgent meeting. Mr. Tagil is facepalming at his desk, telling Hyeon that he really went and did it this time. He lets out a long sigh, looking like he hasn't slept in a month. Hyeon asks if he's happy now that he has the evidence he wanted, reaching into his jacket. He tosses several blister packs of monster power onto the table, offering them to the government for free. Taegil stares at the pills, knowing this is the smoking gun that will finally allow them to dismantle Jongjin. He thanks Hyun for reporting, but Hyun cuts him off, telling him that in return, the government has to do something for him. He points a finger at the official, his eyes serious as he makes his demands. A news report flashes on the screen, announcing a full investigation into monster power and its link to increased aggression in hunters. Yuseong is reading the news on his phone, impressed that the government is actually taking action for once. Hyeon mutters that if they couldn't even handle this, they'd be idiots, not a government. Yuseong scratches his head, thinking it's a bit disappointing that they didn't get to have a real war. Hyeon gives him a look, asking if he seriously thought a full-scale war was a good idea. He tells Yusong that a single phone call is always better than wasting strength in a fight. Yusong suddenly stands up and tells Hyeon they need to go out, right now. Hyeon starts to ask what the rush is, but a sudden, blinding flash of light outside the window cuts him off. Boom! A massive explosion rocks the building, shattering the glass and sending a fireball into the sky. Rubble falls like rain as the badass headquarters is torn apart. The office is a wreck, smoke and fire consuming the place where they were just relaxing. Hyeon emerges from the debris, shirtless and covered in soot, a piece of metal tubing clenched between his teeth like a wild animal. Yusong walks out of the smoke, complaining that he had a bad feeling about this, and mocking Hyeon for running off without him. Hyeon is furious, pointing out that Yusong was the one who told him to go out in the first place. He looks up at the massive hole in their skyscraper, realizing that someone just tried to assassinate them in broad daylight. Yusong tells him to cover himself up because he looks disgusting, standing there shirtless in the street. Hyeon is just relieved that none of the other guild members were in the building when it went off. Yusong laughs, calling him tough as they stand amidst the burning wreckage. A voice from the rubble begs for help. It's the poor manager, Jaemun, who is pinned under a rock and complaining that his wallet burned. Ambulances arrive on the scene, paramedics rushing to help the victims of the blast. Jaemun is loaded onto a stretcher, his eyes wide with rage as he mutters that he's going to kill the bastards who did this. The office is completely destroyed, their hard work reduced to ash and twisted metal. Mr. Taegil arrives on the scene, looking at the destruction with a grim expression. He spots Hyeon and Yuseong sitting on some rubble, looking remarkably calm for people who just got bombed. He asks what kind of state Hyeon is in, looking at his bizarre new outfit. Hyeon points at Yuseong, who apparently quickly bought him a tiny red leather jacket and floral shirt that looks absolutely ridiculous. Taegil asks who caused this mess, and Hyeon just shrugs, saying he was just standing still when it happened. The official asks if he has any guesses about who might hold a grudge against him. Hyeon starts thinking, tapping his chin as the list of enemies starts to grow in his head. Taegil says even for a monster like Hyeon, he can't imagine a grudge that would lead to a terror attack like this. Hyeon tells him to hold on, because he's literally counting his enemies on his fingers. He hits 21 and complains that there are just too many people who hate him to pick just one. Yuseong sighs and points toward a helicopter hovering in the distance, dropping red leaflets over the city. The red papers flutter through the air like falling leaves, covering the streets. Hyeon reaches out and catches one of the papers in mid-air. It's the Jongjin Guild flag, with their name written in bold, aggressive strokes. Hyeon stares at the paper, a dark, dangerous smile spreading across his face as he realizes the real war has finally started. In a peaceful forest, a woman is panting heavily, her breath visible in the morning light. It's Hong Chaeyeon, and she looks exhausted, her high heels sinking into the dirt as she stumbles through the trees. A voice calls out, "Oh dear, you look really busy," dripping with a mocking, superior tone. Chaeyeon looks up, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and recognition. A handsome man in a white suit stands before her, a calm smile on his face, as he asks why she called him here in the middle of all this chaos. The chapter ends with the reveal of this mysterious new player, leaving the fate of the Jongjin master hanging in the balance. The city is screaming as a mysterious drug turns neighbors into monsters, and the man pulling the strings is finally stepping out of the shadows. Kang Hyeon is done playing defense. It's time to hunt the mastermind. The world of Veira is a realm on the edge of annihilation, but it's just a distraction from the real war brewing on Earth. A dangerous gate has opened, and the story of Veira rests in the hands of the summoned heroes, though our MC has his own problems to deal with. From royal lizardmen to legendary beast cores, the challenges are mounting, but the real monsters are the ones wearing human faces. Solo Resurrection Chapter 61 kicks off with the aftermath of the explosion that leveled the badass headquarters. The sun sets over the city, casting a long shadow on the ruins of what used to be our hero's base of operations. Hyon stands in the wreckage, his muscles bulging through a simple orange t-shirt as he prepares to head out for a little payback. Yusong asks if he's really going, and Hyon just scoffs, thinking it's a waste of breath to even ask. He holds up the red Zhongjin leaflet like a VIP invitation to a slaughterhouse, a dark smirk playing on his lips. Taegil sighs, realizing there's no stopping him, and surprisingly offers his full support for the first time. Hyon is caught off guard by the sudden help, but Taegil reveals that the ones distributing the monster-powered drug are the same bastards behind the dungeon terrorism. The MC's eyes narrow as the pieces of the puzzle finally start falling into place. Taegil explains that while tracking the terrorist Hyon captured, they found undeniable evidence of a shadow organization with over 100 members. Hyon picks his nose casually as he remembers the harpy fatty guy he beat up a few chapters back. Taegil corrects him. The guy's name was Jung Yong-sik, and mentions they're finally getting close to the leadership. Hyon asks if the captured terrorist confessed the name of the big boss. His curiosity finally piqued. He struggles to remember the name for a second, tapping his chin while Yu Seong looks on. Choi Min-jun, he says, the name hanging in the air like a death sentence. The title card flashes as we transition to the man himself, the mastermind behind the chaos. Choi Min-jun stands in a quiet forest, looking dapper in his white suit as he asks why he was called out. Hong Cheon is at his feet, panting and covered in sweat, realizing she's just been a pawn in his game. She collapses to her knees, the realization hitting her that everything has gone horribly wrong. She remembers the explosion she ordered on the badass office, questioning why she ever listened to this man. There's no turning back now. She's crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. She looks at the ruins of her pride, knowing she's ruined her own life and the lives of her guild members with her own hands. A flashback shows her younger self, full of hope and a desire to actually do some good. She only wanted to grow her guild and hunt more monsters to help humanity, but the hunger for power changed her. She wanted to be stronger, to be the shield her people needed, but she chose the wrong path to get there. Tears stream down her face as she looks at the monster she's become, the regret heavy in her chest. She grips her weapon, the purple energy crackling weakly as her body starts to fail her. Min-jun just watches her with a cold, pitying smile, as if he's watching a boring movie. Cheon snaps, roaring that it's all his fault as she lunges at him with her massive axe. Min-jun doesn't even move, his eyes narrowing as he mutters "oh dear" with absolute boredom. He tells her she's doing something she'll regret, his tone sounding more like a teacher than a killer. He smiles as the rest of the Zhongjin Guild charges in, desperate to save their master. "Kill them!" the hunters roar, but they have no idea what they're actually running into. Min-jun's eyes glow a terrifying red as he calls them little bugs who don't know their place. Red energy erupts from his body like a blooming flower of death, a manic grin splitting his face. The hunters are instantly snared by glowing red tentacles, their bodies lifting off the ground as they gasp for air. The energy is thick and suffocating, a visual representation of Min-jun's overwhelming power. Min-jun delivers a brutal kick that sends Cheon flying, her axe spinning away as she coughs up a spray of blood. A massive explosion of red light levels the area, showing that Min-jun isn't just a strategist, he's a monster. One of the hunters screams for his master as a tentacle wraps tightly around his throat. The sound of bone cracking echoes through the forest as Min-jun systematically wipes out the guild. He stands in the center of the carnage, his tentacles holding up the dying hunters like trophies. A close-up shows a hunter gasping his last breath, his eyes vacant as the life is drained out of him. Min-jun walks away casually, leaving a trail of bodies and a broken Hong Cheon behind. Cheon is slumped against a tree, her breathing shallow and ragged as she clutches her chest. She reaches into her pocket with a trembling hand, searching for something to end the pain. She looks down at the monster power capsules, the very things that destroyed her life. Min-jun's voice echoes in her head, commanding her to EAT and give him one last piece of data. Her eyes flare a terrifying pinkish red as she realizes she's nothing more than a lab rat to him. He tells her she's useless now, but that her final moment will at least serve as useful test data. "Die nobly for humanity," he says, a twisted joke that makes her blood boil. Hours later, the badass trio and Han Siwon arrive at the scene, the air thick with the smell of blood. They enter the Zhongjin headquarters, finding the place in absolute ruins. Hyeon notes that they erased their traces and ran away, but the signs of a struggle are everywhere. He turns to Siwon, asking why the acting master of the Guardian Guild is still following them around. Siwon strikes a heroic pose, shouting about protecting humanity, while Hyeon just sighs and tells him to protect all he wants. A wow escapes someone's lips as they venture deeper into the dark hallways. The place has been completely trashed, and Hyeon wonders if the Zhongjin master left any traces behind. Sunga points toward a door at the end of the hall, her eyes sharp and alert. It's the guild master's office, the heart of the Zhongjin Empire. Hyeon pauses for a second, sensing something disturbing behind the door. He kicks the door open with a heavy thud, his face set in a grim expression. Inside, he finds a man coughing up a puddle of blood, his body mangled beyond repair. Hyeon stares in silence, the brutality of the scene making even him take a step back. It's a mutated hunter, his eyes glowing with an unstable light as he struggles to stay conscious. The mutated hunter looks up and gasps Hyeon's name, his voice a raspy whisper as the chapter ends. We dive into a flashback, the day the tutorial began on Earth and the world changed forever. Cheon and her friend Ji-hee were both awakened together, fighting off skeletons with smiles on their faces. Cheon had the talent to clear Stage 4, but she never really cared about being a hero. She was just happy to be by her friend's side. She was just an ordinary office worker before the upheaval, and she would have been fine staying that way. But Ji-hee was different. She was a firefighter with a heart of gold who wanted to save everyone. Ji-hee was happy to have the power to protect until she lost her own family to a monster wave she couldn't stop. A single flower is laid on a cold floor, a symbol of the life Ji-hee lost when she eventually failed to save herself. Cheon sits at the funeral, her hands clenched in her lap as the regret starts to consume her. She was angry at her friend for being a rescuer who couldn't even survive, her grief turning into a bitter hatred for weakness. She stares at the funeral photo, realizing that Ji-hee died simply because she wasn't strong enough. She picks up a flower, the determination in her eyes hardening like stone. She decided right then that she would carry on Ji-hee's will, but in her own, more brutal way. She would get stronger at any cost, ensuring that she would never be the one sitting at a friend's funeral again. The flashback ends with a crack, as Hyeon delivers a sharp chop to the mutated hunter's head, shouting that he doesn't care about the story. He wonders why everyone he meets suddenly starts telling their life story as they're about to die. He looks down at the broken man, the office around them a tomb of glass and concrete. The hunter mutters that he can't justify what he did, the weight of his actions finally crushing him. He apologizes to Hyeon, gasping that he didn't mean for things to end up this way. He claims he had no idea the medicine would have such horrific side effects, his blood staining the floor. Hyeon just stares at him with a blank expression, his patience wearing thin. He bluntly asks, "Who are you? Do I know you?" A cold reminder of how little he cares for his enemies. Hyeon assumes the guy is just a random Zhongjin member, while Yuseong watches from the door. Siwon is the only one who recognizes him, shouting in shock that the man on the floor is actually the Zhongjin guildmaster. The dying man lets out a hysterical laugh, the irony of being forgotten by his rival finally breaking him. He admits that losing to guys like this, who don't even remember his name, is the ultimate insult. But he realizes that's exactly why he lost, because Hyeon and his crew are on a completely different level of crazy. He tells Hyeon there's one last thing he needs to hear about the man behind everything, Choi Minjun. The scene fades as he spills every secret he knows, the city lights twinkling through the broken window. He gives one final warning. Minjun is strong, stronger than anything they've faced so far. He claims even top-tier hunters like Han Seon or Choi Dongwoo wouldn't stand a chance against him. Minjun is definitely a tutorial graduate, someone who has survived the same hell as Hyeon. Hyeon muses that there must be other graduates who never reported to the government, using their powers for their own twisted goals. The master's heart starts thumping erratically, the drug finally reaching its terminal phase. His time is up, and he makes one final, desperate request of the man who defeated him. "Kill me," he begs, his face twisting into a mask of pure agony and drug-induced madness. He wants Hyeon to end his suffering, and then hunt down Choi Minjun to avenge everyone he's destroyed. Hyeon draws his sword, the blade humming with a deadly purple energy as he mutters, "Well, I'll see." The mutated master lunges forward one last time, a mindless beast fueled by a lethal dose of monster power. Hyon is a blur of motion, his sword cutting through the air in a perfect arc as he whispers, "One strike, two cuts." He tells the dying man to be born kind and strong in his next life, a rare moment of grim respect. The master's body shatters into shards of light and blood, his items clattering to the floor. Hyon stands alone in the center of the room, his sword resting on his shoulder as he pulls out his phone. He calls Taegil, telling him to send a cleanup crew because the Jongjin Guild is officially finished. The sun rises over the city, and Hyon lets out a massive yawn, the adrenaline finally fading. He sits on a ledge with Yusong, complaining that nothing much happened given how much hype there was. Yusong suggests going to the office for some beers, but Hyon has to remind him that their office is a pile of ash. At least he got some loot. He holds up Camille's ring, a high-grade item that belonged to the former master. He checks the new ability he gained, Mad Dog, which increases stamina and makes him a relentless predator once he starts a fight. Xion thinks the name is a bit off, but his teammates just laugh and tell him it suits him perfectly. Siwon watches them from the background, muttering that they're all crazy bastards who don't know how to act in normal society. He realizes that no matter how weird they are, they're undeniably the strongest people he's ever seen. He watches Hyon's profile against the morning sun, a sudden realization hitting him. He knows now that what his Guardian Guild needs isn't just faith or justice. It needs strength. Overwhelming, unstoppable strength. He's seen 2 guild masters fall into ruin by chasing power they couldn't control. He knows there's only one man who should be leading them now. He walks up to Hyon, his face set in a look of absolute determination. He bows deeply and shouts for Hyon to take our Guardian Guild, a request that leaves everyone stunned. He begs to be accepted into the Badass Guild, willing to give up everything to follow a true leader. Hyon just gives him a look of pure confusion, his mind already drifting toward breakfast. "What?" he mutters, the chapter ending on a perfect comedic beat. Siwon starts his sales pitch, explaining that the Guardian Guild is actually a pretty big deal. He claims they were ranked 2nd in favorability nationwide, but Hyon just keeps walking, muttering, "Not interested." Siwon won't give up, following them down the street and insisting his members are skilled enough to be welcomed anywhere. Hyon finally snaps, shouting that he's really, truly not interested in managing a bunch of random hunters. Siwon keeps talking, acting like he didn't even hear the rejection. A vein pops in Hyon's forehead as his patience finally reaches its absolute limit. He mutters about how fuffing annoying the guy is, his hand clenching into a fist. Siwon just keeps smiling awkwardly, trying to ignore the literal red aura of rage emanating from the MC. Hyon asks, "Want me to hit you?" his voice low and dangerous. Siwon flinches, his heroic facade finally cracking under the threat of a beatdown. He stammers an apology and runs off, singing a pathetic little song about being a guardian of humanity to hide his embarrassment. Yusong watches him go, suggesting they should probably restrict access to the office from now on. Hyon scratches his head, reminding Yusong that they don't have an office and that Taegil will probably handle the relocation. Suddenly, a wave of screams erupts from the street as civilians start running for their lives. Hyon looks on in shock, his eyes widening as he sees the chaos unfolding. "Sar, what the hell is this now?" he mutters, the title card flashing as a new nightmare begins. A news anchor reports that cases of citizens losing control and attacking others are breaking out all over the country. Hundreds of cases have been reported in just 2 hours, and the government is considering declaring martial law. The rioters aren't just angry, their eyes are glowing red, and they're attacking with a feral, monstrous intensity. Soldiers have set up blockades, shouting for the crowd to stay back or they'll be forced to open fire. The young soldiers are terrified, wondering if they really have to shoot their own people. A mutated civilian lunges at a soldier with a primal roar, his face twisted into a demonic mask. The soldier screams as he's tackled to the ground, the peace of the city shattered in an instant. A blue blur cuts through the crowd, a single strike ending the threat as Hyon arrives on the scene. He looks around at the carnage, his face set in a cold, analytical expression. He walks up to the soldiers and calmly asks who's in charge of this mess. He grabs the commander by the collar, telling him to get his head straight and stop hesitating. Hyon explains that while they look like monsters, their bodies are still human, so their defense is trash, meaning they can handle this with guns. The soldier protests that they're civilians, but Hyon just glares, asking if he still doesn't understand how serious the situation is. He tells them there are thousands of these things rampaging and he's got beef to eat, so they need to move fast. The The soldier salutes in terror, promising to keep Hyun's advice in mind. Hyun sprints back into the chaos, the riot throwing the entire country into a state of panic. The violence finally starts to calm down after a full day, leaving the streets of Seoul covered in blood and wreckage. 2 days later, we see a quiet house in a nice neighborhood, a far cry from the war zone in the city. It's a special ability user management team safe house, and the badass trio are finally getting some rest. Sunga is checking the internet, where people are debating if it's finally safe to go outside. She scrolls through a video of Hyun's advice to the soldiers, with the comments calling him everything from a legend to a total psycho. Hyun stares at the ceiling, his face blank as he listens to his teammate read the comments. Yusong leans over his shoulder asking what he's doing, and catches a glimpse of a comment calling Hyun crazy handsome. Hyun nearly jumps out of his skin, shouting that he wasn't doing anything while Sunga looks on with a raised eyebrow. She admits it's a nice house and asks if this is going to be their new permanent base. Hyun tells her they're just borrowing it, and that Taegil is still looking for a new office for them. He suggests thanking Taegil for the house, but Yusong just mocks him, saying thanking people really doesn't suit him. Hyun calls Taegil, but the man picks up sounding like he's about to have a stroke from stress. Hyun asks why he sounds so grumpy, joking that people might think he's bored. Taegil snaps that he's busy and lets out a long, weary sigh. Hyun thanks him for the safe house but mentions he has something much more important to talk about. Taegil is staring at a wall of monitors showing the national drug epidemic, telling Hyun to keep it short. Hyun confirms that the mass riots are definitely related to the monster power drug, something Taegil already suspected. Hyun suddenly asks if Taegil can get him something like poison, specifically something that rots the organs. Taegil is stunned. Asking for a hopelessly deadly poison as a short request is absolutely insane. Hyun clarifies that he's not trying to hurt anyone, he also needs information on a skill book for poison resistance. Taegil is surprised he even knows such a rare skill exists, and Hyun just gives him a mysterious nod. Taegil starts searching his database, warning that even if he finds it, the book will cost a fortune. Hyun says he has lots of money, but Taegil shocks him by saying the price will be at least tens of billions. Hyun hangs up and looks at his crew, admitting that they need a massive amount of cash, and they need it fast. He orders them to come up with some ideas on how to make billions in a single day. Sunga raises her hand tentatively, suggesting that they should start making guild merchandise. Merch? Hyun repeats, his face looking like he's just been told he needs to become a K-pop idol to save the world. Rain pours down on the safe house as lightning splits the sky, setting a heavy mood for the night ahead. Inside, someone is frantically typing on a laptop, their fingers moving with a desperate, manic energy. It's Jamoon, and he's literally Googling how to assault his boss without getting caught because he's fed up with this shitty guild. Our boy Hyun leans in with a terrifyingly calm smile, asking Jamoon if he heard the latest task. He wants Jamoon to work out a full merchandise business plan with the new guys, leaving the poor clerk looking like a ghost. Hyun gives him a deadline of just 1 day, walking away as Jamoon curses him out as a literal devil. Suddenly, the doorbell rings, catching Hyun off guard since no one is supposed to know they're here. Hyun wonders if it's another government official, but he decides to head to the door and see who's bothering them. He opens it to find Han Siwon, the former Guardian leader, standing in the rain looking like a drowned rat. Yuseong is annoyed that people keep finding their secret spot, calling Siwon incredibly persistent for tracking them down. Sunga tells him not to open the door, assuming he's just here to beg for a job again. Siwon is desperate, wondering why Hyun won't just accept them since their guild needs to grow, and they're righteous fighters. The doorbell won't stop ringing, and Hyun finally snaps, telling Yusong to go out there and smash that thing. Yuseong pulls out his spiked mace with a psycho grin, asking if he should aim for the legs or the head first. Hyun has to clarify that he meant break the doorbell, not the person standing behind it. Sunga points out that it's not just Siwon this time, there are 3 of them waiting in the rain. Hyun lets them in but bluntly tells them he doesn't have anything to offer them. He hands them a couple of paper cups, telling them to at least have some barley tea while they talk. The 3 visitors, Han Si-won and the Jo brothers, look at the cups and immediately realize they're actually being served beer. Hyun sits across from them, demanding to know how they found a secret safe house provided by the government. The trail of info is a total mess, one heard from the handler, the other from Si-won, and the last just followed his brother. Hyun sighs at the terrible security and tells them to get to the point. Si-won starts to speak, but Hyun shuts him down instantly, saying he's already rejected him. Then, silver-haired Jo Seong-chan stands up, introducing himself and his guild, Haeseon. He bows deeply, thanking Hyun for saving his brother's life and taking down the corrupt Jongjin guild. Hyun brushes off the praise, asking Seong-chan what he actually wants from him. Seong-chan asks if Hyun would take the Haeseon remnants into the Bade's guild, leaving Hyun shocked that everyone wants to join. They try to sell themselves as useful fighters and managers, but Hyun just wonders why the job market is this bad. Thinking Hyun is still undecided, they pull out a massive box of premium Korean beef as a token of thanks. The moment Hyun sees that beef, the deal is sealed. He shakes Seong-chan's hand and welcomes them to Bade's. The Jo brothers are thrilled, but Siwon is left standing there in shock that all it took was some high-end steak. Siwon isn't about to be outdone. He stands up with a fired-up look in his eyes. He screams that he'll pay for a full beef dinner for everyone if Hyun just accepts his team as a bonus. There's a long, awkward silence as the three of them wait for the MC's judgment. Hyun looks them dead in the eye, processing the offer of even more free food. He gives a big thumbs up, and Siwon looks like he just won the lottery. Hyun points them toward Jamoon for the paperwork, leaving the clerk wondering if he's ever going to see his family again. Jamoon raises a trembling hand, trying to make a suggestion to his merciless boss. With dark circles under his eyes, he begs to hire more office staff since he's currently dying under the workload. Hyun scratches his head, not really caring about the details, and tells Jamoon to just handle the hiring himself. In a move of generosity, Hyun announces that Jamoon is now promoted to team leader, prompting a half-hearted round of applause. Jamoon stares blankly into the abyss, realizing a promotion just means he has more responsibility and less sleep. He goes back to his computer, but now he's Googling the cost of hiring a professional hitman to take out a high-level hunter. Hyun sits back down and casually asks the new recruits what their current levels are. When they answer 46, 42, and 36, Hyun is genuinely confused by how low they are. He asks how they can be guild leaders at that level, then checks in with Yuseong, who reveals he's level 53, while Hyun is 58. Sunga sheepishly admits she's only 46, though she's proud of how far she's come since the beginning. Hyun realizes the rest of the guild members must be even weaker, while the new recruits think these guys are just freakishly strong. A wild idea pops into Hyun's head, and he smacks his fist into his palm with a grin. He tells Siwon to bring every single guild member to the safe house by tomorrow morning. Siwon asks if it's for registration, but Hyun tells him that when hunters gather, there's only one thing to do. The Jo brothers are stunned when they realize he wants to dive into a dungeon immediately. They try to argue that they need to practice teamwork first, but Hyun just lets out a mocking laugh. He tells them that if you roll around until you're nearly dead, the teamwork and skills will line up naturally. The new guys feel a sudden, icy chill as they realize they've just signed up for a tour of hell. A narrating box confirms that at this exact moment, they knew they had made a terrible mistake. Lightning strikes again as if to warn them that there is officially no turning back. The next day, Hyun stands before the combined guild members at the entrance of a massive glowing dungeon gate. He lays out the guild rules: don't pick pointless fights, and always pay back your debts whether they're good or bad. The third and final rule is the simplest: become stronger than anyone else on the planet. He claps his hands together, signaling that the talk is over and the real work is beginning. With a terrifyingly excited face, Hyun welcomes them to their orientation as the dungeon gates slowly creak open. Hyun sits on the couch, folding his arms as he grills the new leaders about the numbers they brought. Siwon explains that out of his entire guild, only 10 loyal elites remained after their original leader fell. The Jo brothers admit they only have 2 survivors, as the rest of their guild completely collapsed during the recent chaos. They promise to reach out to more former comrades, but Hyun just taps his chin thoughtfully. He mumbles to himself that 10 people should be enough because they won't die anyway, which leaves Siwon sweating bullets. Hyun covers his tracks with a fake smile, telling them he was just saying welcome. He asks about the team composition, specifically if they have a healer among the survivors. Siwon confirms they have one, and a dark, predatory smirk spreads across Hyun's face. He tells them they'll see what he has planned tomorrow, ending the meeting on an ominous note. Cut to the next morning, the recruits are standing in front of a massive dungeon, looking completely confused. Hyun laughs, asking them why they're surprised that an orientation for hunters would take place in a dungeon. He tells them to quit being nervous because they're officially starting their first raid together right now. He points to Yuseong and Sunga, calling them safety staff to reassure the terrified rookies. The bright sky shines over the gate, but the atmosphere is anything but peaceful. Hyun's eyes glow a menacing red as he leads the charge, signaling that the tutorial hell is back in session. The location is revealed, a D-rank dungeon known as the Tomb of the Golem. Inside, chaos erupts as a massive stone golem smashes through the earth, sending debris and hunters flying. One recruit is coughing up blood, his face battered and his shield barely holding together. His teammates look on in horror as their comrade is beaten into the dirt by the relentless monster. Instead of helping, Hyun stands there with his arms crossed, screaming at the fallen man to get up and fight. He mocks them, asking how they expect to protect humanity if they have zero guts in a simple D-rank fight. Siwon tries to intervene, saying the recruits have reached their limit and need a break. Hyun tells him to shut up and watch, then turns his fury on the healer, asking why she stopped. Siwon tries to stop him, but Yeon is already moving toward the backline. He sees Yeonha, the healer, on her knees with a nosebleed, completely drained of mana from trying to save her team. She literally vomits blood onto the floor from the sheer mental and physical strain of overusing her powers. Siwon points out that she was only level 21, but Hyun just asks a cold, unexpected question: "Have you ever run out of mana?" Siwon is stunned into silence, not understanding where the MC is going with this. Hyun repeats the question, his gaze piercing through Siwon's righteous facade. Siwon argues that the body gives off warning signs like nosebleeds to prevent total mana depletion. Hyun explains the actual process. First your vision narrows, then everything goes black. We see a flashback of Hyun's own training, where his muscles convulsed and he was left face down in a pool of his own blood. He describes the irregular heartbeat and the struggle to breathe that comes with hitting absolute zero. Then he breaks into a manic grin, declaring that this state of near death is actually perfect. The Joe brothers are horrified, as they've never heard of such an insane method for growth. Hyun says it's because no one is brave, or crazy, enough to actually do it. He points out that healers level up slowly because they never put themselves in the line of fire. He believes the only way to make their stats skyrocket is to force them into a life-or-death corner. He stares at the bleeding healer, his eyes reflecting a brutal philosophy. We see images of his past struggles, confirming that the fastest way to power is to push yourself to the brink of the grave. Hyun looks back at them with a smirk, completely confident in his hellish training program. Siwon stammers that they only have one life and can't fight like they're immortal. Suddenly, a massive stone fist crashes into the ground right behind them, ending the conversation. A giant golem looms over one of the recruits, who can only stare up in paralyzed terror. Before the monster can strike, Hyun drops in and obliterates the golem's head with a single, mana-charged punch. He tells the terrified rookie that he already gave them a promise. He crushes a handful of high-grade mana stones, letting the energy rain down on the exhausted hunters, and tells them they won't die. Suddenly, Yuseong's voice rings out from across the dungeon, sounding way too happy. The blonde psycho is laughing like a kid at a playground as he runs toward the group. He's literally herding two more giant golems toward the exhausted recruits, like he's playing a game of tag. The recruits scream for death as the golems close in, but Hyun just smiles, telling them to get ready for the next round. He tells them to fight like they're ready to die, because as long as he's there, he'll resurrect them into something better. Cut to a social media feed where rumors are already spreading about Bades' massive recruitment drive. Anonymous commenters point out that the members in the new guild photos look like they've been rolled through a meat grinder. People are laughing at how hilariously messed up and exhausted their faces look in the official uploads. The official Bades photo shows the entire team looking like a group of murderous zombies with the caption, "Let's live righteously." Siwon and Yuseong are in the front, and while Yuseong looks great, the rest of the guys look like they've seen the literal afterlife. The internet is convinced that Bades didn't just clear a dungeon, they probably just killed everyone inside. At a restaurant, premium beef sizzles on a grill, but the mood at the table is incredibly tense. Jo Dongwon puts his chopsticks down and tells Siwon that joining Hyun was a mistake because the guy is a total madman. He's furious, saying that there's no sense of justice in Bades and this isn't what they signed up for. Siwon calmly corrects him, reminding him that he's no longer a vice guild master, he's just a team leader now. Yeonha, the healer, is literally crying into her food, terrified that someone is going to die if this training continues. The team begs Siwon to take them back so they can restart the Guardian Guild on their own terms. They argue that with their skills, they can rebuild from scratch without having to deal with Hyun's insanity. Siwon taps his hand on the table, listening to the complaints of his broken teammates. Dongwon keeps ranting, calling Hyeon the worst kind of unpredictable bastard. But Siwon cuts him off, admitting that while Hyeon is a madman, he is also stronger than anyone he's ever seen. He emphasizes that the gap in power between Hyeon and everyone else is absolutely massive. He knows they can't expect lofty ideals or kindness from a guy who's lived through hell. The beef continues to cook as Siwon explains that guardian ideals have no place in their current world. He slams his hand on the table, telling them that the only thing certain under Hyeon's lead is that they will become strong. He flashes back to their last failed raid, realizing that a strong heart means nothing when you're being crushed by a monster. He clenches his fist, declaring that justice without strength carries absolutely no weight in this world. He tells his team he won't force them to stay, but he has one final request. He bows his head deeply, asking them to trust him and follow his lead for just one more week. The steam rises from the meat as the weight of his words hangs over the entire table. The team looks at their leader, seeing the desperation and the newfound conviction in his eyes. With a heavy sigh, Dongwon finally agrees to endure it for exactly 7 more days. Cut to 1 week later, the sun is shining over a new location, but things have clearly changed. A group of low-level hunters enters an E-rank goblin swamp, complaining about how damp and annoying the place is. They think it's the perfect spot for safe farming since it's wide and usually empty. Suddenly, the lead hunter stops in his tracks, noticing something weird ahead. The trail is littered with dead goblins that haven't even been looted for their precious magic stones. The hunters are confused, wondering who would be rude enough to clear a path without marking it or taking the loot. They find a massive pile of magic stones just sitting there on a corpse, sparkling in the light. They think they've hit the jackpot, laughing about how much money this free haul is going to make them. As they start to celebrate, a series of rhythmic metallic sounds echo from deeper in the swamp. The sounds are getting closer, and the hunters realize there's a massive fight happening nearby. Fearing that the owners of the loot are coming back, they decide to grab what they can and run. But before they can move, a literal army of goblins bursts from the bushes, looking absolutely terrified. A flash of blue mana cuts through the air with a deafening crack sound. A goblin is sliced in half mid-air, blood spraying everywhere as a figure emerges from the chaos. It's the Bade's recruits, and they've turned into total psychos, laughing as they demand more blood and more screams. Dongwon, who was complaining just a week ago, is now shirtless and shredded, charging into the monsters like a beast. Even the healer, Yonha, is standing in the middle of the carnage with a manic grin, keeping the frontliners overcharged with mana. Hyeon stands in the background, laughing at how cocky his new students have become after just a warm-up. He decides to turn up the heat, announcing that today's full course will be a D-rank dungeon, prompting a roar of excitement from his team. The low-level hunters who are trying to loot can only stand there with their jaws on the floor. They wonder what kind of monsters they just witnessed, realizing the rumors about the guild were true. As the sun sets over the city, a specific rumor begins to spread like wildfire among the hunting community. People are saying that Bades is no longer just a guild, it's now one giant collective version of Kanghyun. Later that night, the recruits are back at the restaurant, drinking and eating like absolute savages. Siwon reminds Dongwon that his 1-week limit is up and asks if he still wants to leave. Siwon scratches his head, feeling a bit awkward about how well things have actually turned out. Dongwon slams his fist on the table, screaming that 1 week isn't nearly enough and they need to keep going. With a face red from booze and adrenaline, he declares that this life is exactly what he always wanted. Siwon just smiles, pulls out a black credit card, and tells the team leader to go ahead with round 2 of drinks. He tells them to enjoy their food as he heads out for some fresh air. He walks alone through the quiet streets, his footsteps echoing on the pavement. He looks up at the sky, asking his former master Park Se-yeon if he's watching them from heaven. He reflects on how the original Guardian Guild collapsed, but the spirit they left behind is still burning bright. He's happy that his team is finally pushing through with their beliefs and becoming stronger than ever. But as he stares at the moon, his expression slowly shifts into one of deep, unsettling confusion. The stars shine bright over the city, but Siwon can't shake the feeling that something has gone terribly, horribly wrong with his people. The new recruits stand in awe, their eyes sparkling as they look up at their new home, finally feeling like they've joined the big leagues. Towering over the city is the brand new Bades Guild headquarters, a sleek glass skyscraper with badass plastered across the top in giant red letters. Yuseong and Sunga are soaking in the vibes, proud of how cozy the place looks in the daylight, while Hyun just tells them not to ruin the mood. Hyun officially welcomes the squad to their new base, giving them the simplest set of rules ever. Don't break anything, and don't start any fires. The recruits don't even wait for a second tour. They start sprinting inside like a pack of excited puppies. It's a mad dash for the entrance, as everyone screams to be the first one inside the luxury building. Siwon and the Jo brothers watch the chaos, sweating a bit at how weirdly specific Hyun's no fires rule was. The interior of the lobby is blindingly bright, screaming wealth and high-tier hunter status. One of the guys gasps as he steps into the main hall, completely overwhelmed by the upgrade from their previous basement setup. The first floor is a massive, guild members-only cafe, stocked with enough food and pastries to keep a small army fed. The second floor is a state-of-the-art training room, packed with weights and equipment meant to push their new tutorial stats to the limit. On the third floor, they find a luxury lounge with a commercial-sized fridge fully stocked with ice-cold beer. Hyun and Yuseong are loving the vibe, already planning to add a full cocktail bar to make the place even more elite. But then, something clicks in Hyun's head, and he stops dead in his tracks, staring at his blonde sidekick. He realizes something he completely missed. He asks Yuseong if he's actually underage. Yuseong casually admits he is, leaving Hyun confused because he definitely remembers seeing the kid downing cans of beer earlier. Hyun flashes back to the drinks, but Yuseong reveals that his cans were always 0.0% non-alcoholic. Another memory hits Hyun. At the last company dinner, Yuseong was just chugging Coca-Cola the entire time while everyone else was wasted. Hyun is losing it. The most violent, spiked mace-swinging psycho in the guild has been living a clean, soft drink life this whole time. Hyun tells him to stop pretending to be so innocent, but Yuseong just gives him a blank, confused chibi look. The humor fades as a phone starts ringing, bringing the focus back to the dangerous reality of their world. Hyun picks up his phone, greeting the person on the other end as he steps away from the group. It's Shin Taegil from the government, asking if Hyun likes the new building he helped set up. Taegil is impressed that Hyun managed to decorate the entire skyscraper in just one night, but Hyun just brushes it off. The handler's tone turns serious as he asks Hyun what exactly he's trying to pull with that thing. Hyun realizes he's talking about the new merchandise and admits it wasn't exactly his personal idea. Taegil tells him it's already trending all over the internet, and not necessarily for the reasons Hyun thinks. Hyun is confused until he hears the word figure, and he notices Yuseong and Sunga acting extremely sus in the background. Sensing a disaster, Hyun quickly tells Taegil he'll call him back and turns toward his teammates with a dark look. He pulls up the search results on his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen as he prepares for the worst. Yuseong and Sunga play dumb, pretending they have no idea why the boss is looking at them like he wants to commit a crime. Hyun tells them they're wasting their chance to confess as he types Bade's merch into the search bar. His eyes nearly pop out of his head when he sees a 1/6 scale figure of himself, shirtless, glistening with oil, and looking like a bodybuilder. The listing even includes a special bonus facial part that makes him look like a total deranged lunatic. He scrolls through the comments and sees the entire internet laughing at him, calling the figure gross and too much. A massive blade of mana energy slams into the floor as Hyun's rage finally boils over. He stands there, wreathed in a murderous red aura, demanding an explanation for why he's being sold as a pinup boy. Yuseong tries to talk his way out of it, saying that shirts and keyrings were boring, and they needed a symbol for the guild. The kid leans in with a mischievous grin, telling Hyun that since he's the face of the guild, he is the merchandise. Hyun isn't hearing any of it. He launches a strike at Yuseong, who barely dodges the lethal blow. Yuseong is actually having the time of his life, laughing as he tells Hyun his rage fits the mood of the guild perfectly. He mocks Hyun, telling him his blushing face is making his heart flutter, while the MC looks ready to burn the whole building down. Explosions rock the headquarters as Hyun chases the kid through the halls, leaving the recruits screaming that the building is going to collapse. The sun sets, and the humor of the afternoon is replaced by the cold, dark silence of the night. Bades has moved to an abandoned industrial zone to carry out a secret mission requested by Shin Taegil. The mission is dangerous. They're posing as high-end buyers to make contact with a supplier of the monster-powered drug. The government is finally taking an active role, realizing that the recent monster outbreaks are all linked to these red and white capsules. Standing in the shadows, two figures in hoodies prepare for the deal, though one is still grumbling about the embarrassing figure. The other figure, hidden by a mask, asks why he doesn't just take the listing down if he hates it so much. It's Yuseong, and he reveals that the figure has already sold 500 units in pre-orders alone. Hyeon, hidden under a balaclava, is even more annoyed when he hears that Yuseong's own merch sold 6,000 units. A static-filled voice crackles in their earpieces, cutting through their bickering with a tactical update. Headlights cut through the dark as a black van approaches the warehouse, and several men in suits step out. Yuseong's sixth sense kicks in, and he whispers that he senses roughly 10 people approaching their position. The warehouse doors creak open, revealing a group of professional-looking dealers led by a woman in a gray suit. Yuseong nudges Hyeon, calling him Hyung as he notices something very specific about the leader. He asks Hyeon if he remembers his sixth sense ability, reminding him that his instincts are never wrong. He tells Hyeon to take a very close look at the woman leading the dealer squad. Hyeon looks at her, but she doesn't ring a bell, leaving him wondering who this mysterious dealer is. Yuseong reminds him of their days at the ability training school, where he once sparred with a girl and broke her hand. The memory hits Hyeon. He remembers the face of the girl who was just test data to him back then. Yuseong is disappointed, realizing his former schoolmate has fallen so low that she's now dealing illegal mutation drugs. In a chilling moment of ruthlessness, the kid mutters that he should have smashed her head instead of just her hand back then. The air grows heavy with the coming violence as the two sides face off for a deal that's about to turn into a bloodbath. Hyeon, still in his balaclava, keeps it blunt and professional, demanding to see the merchandise they came for. The dealer, Seon Yuri, isn't falling for it. She tells them they need to show the money first before she reveals the goods. Yuseong clicks open the briefcase, revealing stacks of high-value bills that glow under the dim warehouse lights. Hyeon thinks to himself that the government is pretty bold to donate this much cash, even if there's a tracker hidden inside. Yuri stares at the cash, her eyes narrowing, as she tells them they'll verify the exact amount later. Hyeon signals for her to keep her end of the bargain, and she slowly reaches for a metallic case of her own. As she opens the case, a blinding, unnatural light spills out, but it's not the drug, it's a glowing magic circle. A massive pillar of frost energy erupts from the case, freezing everything in its path with a deafening roar. Thick white fog fills the warehouse as the dealers back away from the blast zone. Yuri sighs, looking at the shattered remnants of a single-use magic stone, complaining that Skull Guy makes them use such crazy tools. She watches as the frozen debris settles, confident that the buyers have been neutralized by the instant blizzard. She scoffs, realizing the buyers were actually from the management team, and mocks them for thinking they wouldn't notice something fishy. Knowing they put a tracker in the money, she prepares to leave, telling her men to head back to base. One of her subordinates suddenly screams her name, pointing toward the center of the ice storm with a terrified expression. A shockwave of heat and pressure erupts from the ice as a dark figure begins to rise through the mist. It's Hyeon. His shirt is gone, his muscles are steaming, and he's laughing like a demon because they've already been found out. Yuri's face pales in absolute terror as she realizes she's looking at the monster of Bades himself. She stammers his name, horrified to find that the legendary Kong Hyeon is the one the government sent to kill them. Hyeon smirks, realizing his reputation has grown, as he watches Yuri desperately pull out a glowing staff to defend herself. She screams at her men to be careful, warning them that they aren't dealing with ordinary people anymore. She calls them crazy pervert psychos, who sell muscular figures of themselves, proving that the merch has ruined their street cred. Hyeon stands there in awkward silence for a second, feeling the burn of that insult more than the ice. Suddenly, Yuseong pops up from behind Hyeon's shoulder with a grin, asking Yuri if she remembers her old acquaintance. Yuri flashes back to the training school, seeing the blood-soaked face of the boy who broke her hand years ago. Hyeon is annoyed that Yuseong used him as a human shield to block the blizzard, but the kid just says he has good instincts for cover. Hyeon tells him he's lucky he's still alive, while Yuri and her men tremble at the overwhelming mana radiating from the pair. The bickering stops as both Hyeon and Yuseong draw their weapons, their eyes locking onto their prey with lethal intent. A blood-red command flashes through the air, "Kill them, ALL!" The dealer squad charges forward, but they're moving in slow motion compared to the tutorial graduates. One dealer swings a sword, but Hyeon is already mid-air, his movements a blur of pure power. Hyeon delivers a brutal kick that shatters the man's guard and sends him flying through a brick wall. The warehouse is filled with the sound of bones breaking as Hyeon systematically dismantles the security team. Yuseong dives into the fray, his spiked mace crackling with purple lightning as he targets the men in suits. He swings with enough force to create a vacuum, leaving the dealers with nowhere to run. The mace connects with a sickening crunch, instantly ending the fight for anyone unlucky enough to be in its path. Hyeon lets out a roar, his adrenaline peaking as he searches for the next target to crush. He realizes Yuseong is getting too carried away and screams at him to capture them alive instead of turning them into paste. Desperate, Yuri slams her staff into the ground, activating the massive jewel at the top. A second, even more powerful blizzard spell ripples outward, turning the entire warehouse into a frozen wasteland. Hyeon shivers from the cold but notices that these dealers are holding up surprisingly well against his pressure. Yuri screams for the ice to freeze them solid, her face twisted in a mixture of fear and fanaticism. For a moment it looks like it worked. Hyeon is encased in a massive jagged block of ice. Yuri watches her trump card magic stone shatter, knowing that was her last chance to survive this encounter. She's heard the legends of Kang Hyun's skill and knows she can't afford to hold anything back, or she'll be ambushed in seconds. She thinks she's won, but then she sees Yuseong's face through the mist, and he doesn't look worried at all. Yuseong casually asks her if she really thinks something that weak would be enough to kill his boss. The ice begins to vibrate, and the dealers look around in horror as their teammates lie broken and frozen on the floor. Yuri realizes that in the short time it took to cast her spell, her entire squad has been neutralized. Yuseong raises his mace over the frozen Hyun, offering to help his Hyun break out of the ice. The ice shatters into a million pieces as Hyun bursts out, but not because of Yuseong. He did it with pure physical strength. Hyeon steps out of the wreckage, looking completely unbothered by the sub-zero temperatures. He flexes his arm, calling the ice trap brilliant as he prepares to end Yuri's resistance once and for all. Yuri stares at him, her mind breaking, as she realizes the man standing before her isn't human. He's a monster. She screams at her remaining men to take the new drug, even though they know the side effects are lethal. The dealers hesitate, knowing they might die, but Yuri screams that they're all dead anyway if they don't transform now. Two glowing red capsules hover in the air, pulsing with a dark, corrupted mana that feels like pure poison. One dealer swallows the pill, and his body immediately begins to bulge and tear as his muscles grow to unnatural sizes. He coughs up blood as purple veins pop out across his face, his humanity dissolving into a feral rage. Hyeon and Yuseong watch as the men transform into massive, hulking beasts that tower over them. Hyeon prepares to strike before they finish changing, but Yuseong catches his arm and tells him to wait. Hyeon is furious, demanding to know why he's stopping him from ending the threat before it peaks. Yuseong gives a creepy, flushed smile, saying it'll be more fun to fight them once they're at their strongest. Hyeon tells the crazy bastard to shut up as the first transformed monster launches itself at them with a bone-shaking roar. The monster's fist crashes down, but Hyeon and the mutated dealer trade blows that send shockwaves through the entire facility. The warehouse finally gives way, exploding in a fireball of mana and debris as the real battle begins. The warehouse is a total war zone as Yuseong and Yuri trade magical and physical blows amidst the falling rubble. One of the mutated monsters catches Hyun's blade with his bare hand, his skin hardened into something like stone. Hyun grinds his teeth, admitting that he didn't expect the monster power junkies to be this tough to cut through. The beast winds up a massive punch, its fist glowing with a corrupt, red energy. The blow connects with a sickening thud, sending a shockwave that cracks the very air around them. A massive explosion of energy rips through the warehouse floor, sending chunks of concrete flying in every direction. Debris rains down as the smoke clears, revealing a landscape of total destruction. The mutated dealer laughs, thinking he's finally landed a killing blow, but Yuseong just watches from the sidelines with a bored expression. The monster turns its sights on the psycho kid, but Yuseong just blinks, completely unimpressed. Yuseong lets out a dark chuckle, saying he's loving this as 3 more mutants surround him. The monster's lunges, but Yuseong moves like a ghost, spinning his mace in a deadly arc that keeps them at bay. He's smiling through the blood on his face, enjoying the high of a chewy fight that actually challenges him. One monster looks him dead in the eye, its pupils dilated and red as it prepares for a final desperate charge. Yuseong catches the beast mid-air, slamming it into the ground with enough force to create a massive crater. The sound of bones snapping echoes through the quiet moments of the fight, a grim reminder of Yuseong's brutality. The monster tries to bite him, but Yuseong just stares it down, his expression cold and devoid of any mercy. Suddenly, a flash of green light cuts through the darkness, aimed directly at the back of Yuseong's head. But it's intercepted. A dagger plunges through the eye of another dealer, pinning him to the ground instantly. The monster lets out a final, agonizing scream as it's put down by a perfectly timed strike. Across the field, another mutant is sent flying by a force they can't even see. Yuri is panicked, realizing her entire mutated squad is being systematically wiped out by Bade's elite. A bright spark of light flashes in the distance, signaling the arrival of the guild's long-range support. An arrow made of pure mana pierces through a monster's chest just as it was about to ambush Yuseong. Sung-ah appears, hanging upside down from a rafter with her bow drawn, looking like a total professional. Yuseong gives a chibi thumbs up, thanking his Nuna for the save, while Yuri realizes they were never alone. With only 2 mutants left, Yuri screams at them to deal with the rat in the rafters. She tries to use her staff again, but she's frozen in place by a sudden overwhelming pressure from behind. Her last monster guard is slammed into a puddle of water, his body twitching as he loses consciousness. The ground shakes as power of the giant activates, and Hyun's stats surge to a level that shouldn't be possible. He stomps forward, each step sounding like a thunderclap as he closes the distance to the dealer boss. Yuri is trembling, backing away as she begs the monster not to come any closer. She swings her staff in a panic, but Hyun just catches it and prepares to deliver a lesson in true strength. The entire factory finally gives way and collapses in a massive cloud of dust, burying the remaining dealers under tons of steel. The dust settles under a clear blue morning sky, revealing the aftermath of the undercover mission. Shin Taegil arrives at the scene, looking at the leveled factory with a face full of disbelief and stress. He asks what the hell they did to make the whole place collapse, but Yuseong just says the enemies resisted harder than expected. Taegil sighs, asking if they at least left any survivors they can actually interrogate. Hyun casually points toward a pile of rubble, saying he buried the one they needed over there. Taegil looks down and sees Seon Yuri, face down in the dirt and growling like a feral animal. Hyun says she looked like the boss, so he kept her alive, while Taegil just rubs his temples in frustration. Hyun and Yuseong walk away, telling Taegil to make sure their reward is a hefty one for all their hard work. Later, the scene shifts to the imposing building of the Ministry of the Interior and Safety. Deep inside the high-security basement, guards stand outside a cold metallic door labeled Interrogation Room. Inside, Taegil reads from a file, confirming the identity of their prisoner, Seon Yuri, age 26. Yuri is strapped into a heavy wooden chair, her head hanging low and her body covered in the grime of the warehouse fight. Taegil notes that she's choosing to remain silent, but he tells her they have plenty of time to keep going. He asks her about Choi Minjun, confirming that he's the head of her shadow organization. He grills her on why they're doing this, the dungeon terrorism, the drugs, asking if it's all just for money. Yuri just lets out a tired sigh, refusing to give the government dogs even a single piece of information. Taegil tells her she's wasting both of their time, but she finally looks up with a defiant smirk. She asks if a dog like him would even understand their goals even if she told him. She clenches her fist against her restraints, her eyes wide with a fanatic's light. She starts laughing hysterically, screaming that only him, Choi Minjun, has the power to save this dying world. Taegil stares at her coldly, realizing they aren't just dealing with a criminal guild but a full-blown religious cult. He looks around the dark room, his face obscured by shadows as he prepares to change his tactics. He lets out a long sigh and reaches for a pair of heavy-duty pliers sitting on a nearby tray. He walks toward her, his movements slow and deliberate, while Yuri begins to realize her silence is about to become very painful. He shoves a gag into her mouth to muffle the screams, his eyes reflecting a darkness that matches the MC's own ruthlessness. He tells her that things could have been easy if she had just answered properly from the start. He grabs her hand, telling her he'll just take one for now, as he prepares to extract the information he needs. A sickening crack fills the room, followed by Yuri's muffled screams of agony echoing through the soundproof walls. Blood spatters onto the cold floor as Taegil casually notes that she still has 9 more chances to speak. Yuri is slumped over, tears and sweat pouring down her face as her mind begins to fracture under the pain. Taegil leans in close, his voice a low, terrifying whisper as he demands she look at him. He asks her one final time, his eyes glowing with a cold intensity, "What is your objective?" The news reaches the shadows. Choi Minjun's elite dealer squad was wiped out in a single night. Minjun sits calmly in his white suit, listening to the report that even with the new drug, his men didn't stand a chance. He's told that Sion Yuri was captured and then vanished, which finally gets a reaction out of the mastermind. He considers the loss of small fries fine, but losing Yuri, someone he actually found useful, is a different story. Minjun wonders if the government brought out their secret weapons, but the answer is much simpler. The name Kang Hyun is uttered, and Minjun's eyes narrow as he recognizes the thorn in his side. Hyon has been a nightmare for him, stopping dungeon breaks, capturing key assets, and ruining every plan Minjun works hard to trigger. Minjun grips his glass, the mana around him beginning to vibrate with his rising irritation. He leans back, calling our boy Hyon a total nuisance that needs to be permanently erased. He gives the order to deal with the MC first, crushing the glass in his hand to show he's done playing games. He decides to relocate their base immediately, knowing his current location is no longer a secret. Since Yuri knows where they are, it's only a matter of time before the government dogs come sniffing around. He walks away, leaving his terrified subordinates behind to handle the logistics of their escape. Minjun expects nothing but good news the next time they speak, setting a dark clock for Hyon's life. He can't get the MC out of his head, recognizing that the Bades Guild is becoming a force that can't be ignored. As he heads to a private bar, he ponders how to handle a man who's strong himself and leads an even stronger group. Suddenly, a realization hits him, and he stops mid-stride. A sinister smile spreads across his face as a new, more devious plan takes shape. He realizes he doesn't just need to kill Hyon, he can use him to tear the whole system down. Cut back to the Bades HQ, where massive banners for Season 1 action figures are draped over the luxury glass exterior. Inside, our guy Hyon is casually chugging a can of beer, but something about it looks off. Suddenly, he lets out a scream and literally vomits blood everywhere, his ears and eyes bleeding out. He casually asks for a tissue while Yuseong notes that he's suffering from some pretty severe internal bleeding. Yuseong is weirded out, asking why the hell his boss is putting literal poison in his beer. Hyon explains that he's testing the toxins he asked Shin Taegil for, all to build up a natural immunity. He laughs like a psycho, claiming it's working perfectly, despite the fact that he looks like he's dying. A system window pops up. Hyon actually gained a poison-resistance skill just by torturing his own organs. He notes that while he recovers fast, this D-rank poison still gives him a weird tingling sensation. Sunga points out that most hunters die instantly from that stuff, and she's impressed the government actually funded his suicide drinks. Hyon smirks, revealing he squeezed the government for the expensive toxins as an apology for their earlier mistakes. The skill ranks up to level E right then and there, proving his brutal methods actually get results. He shouts for the bartender to bring him another one on the rocks, clearly enjoying the pain-based grind. But his bartender is just the poor, exhausted Jaemoon, who's currently drowning in a sea of paperwork and dark aura. Jaemoon's fingers fly across the keyboard, his sanity slipping as he realizes hiring more staff only gave him more people to manage. Hyon leans back in his executive lounge, telling Jaemoon to quit loafing and get back to work. He mocks the clerk, saying the sound of frantic typing actually makes his poison drinks taste better. Jaemoon lets out a long, soul-crushing sigh, the dark stress literally radiating off his body. The poor guy realizes his workload has doubled, and he starts questioning his entire life path. He vows to stick it out for 1 year and then bail, but he's interrupted by a phone call for the boss. Hyon picks up, and a friendly voice introduces himself as Sion Yeon-ho from the Ability Users Association. Hyon recognizes the name, asking if he's one of the high-level guys under the handler Dongwoo. He slams his beer can down, his interest piqued as Yeon-ho mentions they've met briefly before. Hyon remembers the guy's business card and gives a happy shout, clearly remembering a good connection. Yeon-ho asks if the MC is available today to talk about some urgent association business. Hyon tries to play hard to get, but the second Yeon-ho mentions buying him beef, he's already out the door. Hyon meets the guy in the city as the sun sets, with Yeon-ho waving him over with a bright, fake smile. Our boy is literally drooling, admitting it's been way too long since he's seen a high-quality steak. Yeon-ho leads him down a quiet alley, saying the best spots are always hidden away from the main streets. Hyon's internal mad dog instinct should be screaming, but the thought of free beef is currently blinding him. He notes that Yeon-ho seems like a big shot at the association, yet he wasn't anywhere to be seen during the recent raid. Yeon-ho acts embarrassed, admitting that he isn't exactly a frontline combatant. Hyeon is stunned when the guy claims to be only level 3, saying he dislikes killing and prefers office work. Yeon-ho brushes it off as handling odd jobs and gestures toward a traditional-looking restaurant entrance. He calls it a good place to talk, but the atmosphere feels way too isolated for a simple lunch. The beef hits the grill with a sizzle, and Hyeon's eyes are practically turning into heart shapes. Yeon-ho and his subordinates handle the grilling, treating the MC like a king while they prepare to strike. Hyeon is in a beef-induced trance, barely listening as Yeon-ho says they have important matters to discuss. Yeon-ho offers him a drink, and Hyeon happily accepts, shouting for a cold draft beer. The 2 glasses clink, and Hyeon lets out a satisfied sigh as he takes a massive gulp. He praises Yeon-ho's grilling skills before finally asking what this urgent association business is actually about. Suddenly, the room spins. A massive boom echoes in Hyeon's head as a high-level toxin hits his system. Hyeon gasps, his beer glass slipping from his hand and shattering on the floor. He clutches his throat, coughing up blood and foam as his body begins to convulse in absolute agony. Yeon-ho just sits there, his fake smile never wavering as he watches the legendary hunter collapse onto the table. Hyeon falls to the floor, twitching in a pool of his own blood while the restaurant staff drop their act. The waiters surround his body, and Yeon-ho casually adjusts his jacket, looking down at his victim. He pulls out his phone and makes a call, confirming that the target has been successfully dealt with. With a twisted grin, he addresses the person on the other end, Mr. Choi Min-jun, looks at the corpse on the floor, and tells the restaurant staff to handle the disposal themselves. He turns to leave, his face returning to that calm, punchable expression of a corporate snake. The 2 waiters give a creepy smile, looking at Hyeon's body like it's a new toy they get to play with before throwing it away. These guys are the Butchers, Min-jun's personal squad for cleaning up messes and erasing people from existence. They aren't great in a fair fight, but when it comes to torture and corpse disposal, they are absolute, blood-soaked professionals. Yeon-ho sighs, clearly disgusted by having to work with such low-class street thugs. He walks away as the Butchers begin their work, the sound of sharpening knives filling the quiet room. Suddenly, a bloody hand reaches up and grips Yeon-ho's shoulder, stopping him dead in his tracks. Yeon-ho's face twists in shock and horror as a voice whispers for him not to touch his dirty body. Hyeon stands up, his face covered in blood but a wide, terrifying grin on his lips. He casually mentions that the beef was actually pretty good. He mocks the seasoning, leaving Yeon-ho paralyzed as he realizes the poison that should have killed a giant didn't even slow Hyeon down. The poison-resistant skill window flashes. Hyeon was faking the whole time to see who was pulling the strings. One of the Butchers lunges with a knife, but Hyeon just lets the blade drop to the floor without a second thought. He looks at the terrified dealer and asks with a dark chuckle, "Should I hit you first?" Yeon-ho closes his eyes, bracing for the impact of a man who just resurrected from a lethal dose of toxin. The punch is a blur of pure destruction, sending Yeon-ho flying through the air and crashing into the back of the room. The traitor is left slumped against the wall, his face battered and swollen beyond recognition. Hyeon sits back down at the table, casually picking up his tongs as if he's still just having a normal dinner. He mocks Yeon-ho's performance, telling him it was too obvious he was bracing his body before the poison even hit. He insults the guy's intelligence, saying there was no way that was quick improv, it was just a bad script. Hyeon starts grilling more meat, asking Yeon-ho when he thought he actually noticed the trap. He laughs at the level 3 lie, saying it's harder NOT to notice someone that shady. Hyeon notes that Yeon-ho's aura is easily over level 50, making his whole clerk act a complete joke. Yeon-ho is stunned that someone can read a power level just by looking at an aura, but Hyeon just tells him to believe it or not. The traitor remains silent, his broken face reflecting the total defeat of his carefully crafted plan. Hyeon suddenly says, "I'm sorry," catching Yeon-ho off guard as he continues to chew on his beef. Yeon-ho tries to start a villain speech, but Hyeon shuts him down instantly, saying he'll ask about his organization later. He leans in, his face obscured by blood, and tells Yeon-ho that for now, they are going to finish this meal. He shoves a massive piece of meat into his mouth, telling the guy to wait his turn and stop being so impatient. He bluntly states that he doesn't negotiate with terrorists, leaving Yeon-ho to realize he's stuck in a room with a hungry monster. Yeon-ho tries one last time to sway him, claiming that at the current rate, humanity will be wiped out in 5 years. He screams that only Choi Min-jun's group can save the world, but his fanaticism is cut short by a sudden gagging sound. Hyun is disgusted, complaining that the guy is ruining his appetite with all this doomsday talk at the dinner table. He stands up, looming over the tied-up traitor, and says that since he's so desperate to talk, he'll finally listen. But his expression shifts to something demonic as he pulls out a pair of kitchen shears, saying there is no conversation happening here. He places the blades over Yeonho's hand, telling him he's going to spill every secret he knows right now. He gives him a choice. Should he break the pinky first, or go straight for the thumb? Suddenly, Yeonho stops trembling and starts laughing. A faint purple light begins to glow from his mouth. The guy's face turns a dark shade of red as he bites down on a hidden poison capsule, his body spasming one last time. Hyun jumps back as a pulse of dark energy erupts from the traitor's mouth, signaling a forced suicide. He curses under his breath, realizing the pain-in-the-butt bastard actually died before he could get any real intel. Hyun drops the shears into the blood on the floor, annoyed that his dinner date ended so messily. He thinks back on Yeonho's words about humanity being wiped out in 5 years, wondering if there was any truth to the madness. He walks out of the restaurant into the night air, leaving a trail of bloody footprints behind him. A dark premonition flashes in his mind that in 3 years, nations will start to fall, and in 5, the world ends. He realizes Yeonho wasn't talking about a countdown, but a separate danger even worse than the Haken dimension. He remembers the fanatic's face, realizing these people truly believe they are the saviors of a dying world. It's true that dungeon difficulty is rising at an alarming rate, and the current hunters are struggling to keep up. Even C-rank gates, which used to be manageable, are now turning into national disasters that wipe out entire guilds. Hyun stares into the distance, realizing that if gates of even higher ranks start appearing, nobody is safe. He scratches his head, deciding that worrying doesn't change anything, so he might as well just get back to work. He checks his phone and sees 23 missed calls from Shin Taegil, wondering why the government handler is so panicked. He calls back, and Taegil screams into his ear, demanding to know why he's been unreachable for so long. Hyun casually walks down the street, joking that people can miss calls sometimes, and Taegil is acting like a clingy girlfriend. Taegil is too stressed to find the joke funny, screaming for Hyun to get to the martial law command center immediately. Hyun is confused, thinking martial law was already lifted, but Taegil tells him to check the news for once. The handler says it's too big to discuss over the phone, and Hyun reluctantly agrees to head over after changing his bloody clothes. Taegil hangs up before Hyun can ask for details, leaving the MC staring at his phone in annoyance. The line goes dead, and the silence of the city street feels heavier than usual. Taegil stares at his phone, calling Hyun an annoying customer as he prepares for the meeting of a lifetime. The handler's face is full of scars and fatigue, his eyes reflecting the weight of the news he just received. He remembers Hyun's frequent boast that he can't fight an entire army, realizing how true that's about to become. 2 days ago, the military tracked the terrorists to a hideout and deployed their most elite special forces to wipe them out. The operation was supposed to be a guaranteed success, but they ran into one man they weren't prepared for. We see a horrific image of the special forces being shredded and consumed by massive red tentacles. The entire army was annihilated by a single man, Choi Min-jun. Taegil presses his finger onto a scanner, the green light signaling that they are entering one of the most secure locations in the country. Hyun follows him into a sleek, metallic elevator, asking if this is some kind of secret base. Taegil confirms the location is highly classified and warns the MC that if he leaks it, there will be hell to pay. Hyun asks if he looks like someone who would do that, and Taegil gives him a look that says, yes, absolutely. He stops outside a massive set of double doors, his hand trembling slightly on the handle. He warns Hyun one last time that this is an incredibly important meeting and he cannot cause any trouble today. Hyun mocks him, but is secretly impressed, never thinking he'd end up in a room with the actual president of Korea. Sitting at the head of the table is President Han Sung-hun, looking as dignified and tired as a man leading a dying world can be. The room is packed with high-ranking military generals, all of them looking at Hyun with suspicion and disdain. The president is annoyed, asking why Taegil only brought one person when he ordered the entire management team to be present. A smug general with a pen laughs, claiming ability users are just too busy to follow an immediate government summons. Taegil's face goes dark, furious at the insinuation that his team has loose discipline during a national crisis. The military elite keep talking down to the hunters, but Taegil finally snaps and tells them to stop the nonsense. He reminds them that they already followed the military's expert recommendations once, and it resulted in a total slaughter. The president intervenes, agreeing with Taegil that ability users must take the lead in the fight against Minjun. One general argues that times have changed and they must integrate all hunters into the military command structure immediately. Taegil is disgusted, seeing right through their plan to turn guilds into their own private military toy box. He flashes back to the massacre, realizing that the military's ego only bought Choi Minjun time to escape and grow stronger. The generals whisper among themselves, clearly more concerned with reclaiming the power they lost than actually stopping the drug war. Taegil's eyes narrow as he watches their shameless behavior, his patience reaching its absolute limit. Hyeon stands behind him, sighing as he listens to these shameless generals who don't seem to care about the people who died for their mistakes. Hyeon finally speaks up, telling the entire room that he really can't listen to this crap anymore. He slams his fist onto the table, screaming at the generals and asking if they think hunters are just dogs who will roll over for them. He grills them for ruining the last operation and asks them how they can even call themselves generals after such a failure. He stands there with badass on his back, telling them that if it were him, he'd be too ashamed to even stay in uniform. He turns to the president and mocks the situation, saying he must have a hard time babysitting all these incompetent officials. He tells the president to toss these guys out before calling him in next time, then casually starts walking toward the exit. Taegil stands there in shock, wondering why he suddenly feels so strange. A visual wave of mana refreshes the room, and Taegil realizes that hearing someone finally say what needed to be said felt amazing. He realizes that having a mad dog like Hyeon on his side is actually the most comforting thing in the world. Hyeon stops at the door, mockingly saluting and asking Taegil to show him the way out since he doesn't know the exit. The elevator doors close, leaving a room full of furious generals and a silent, contemplative president. The lead general explodes in rage, screaming about how a mere hunter dared to insult the dignity of the nation. The president just sits there with his hands folded, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. As the general continues to rant, the president starts to let out a quiet, wheezing sound. Suddenly, the president bursts into a fit of hysterical laughter that shocks everyone in the room. He wipes his eyes, telling the bald general that it's clearly going to be difficult to continue a serious meeting today. His expression turns cold and sharp as he adjourns the meeting, telling them they'll reconvene once they've learned some humility. The next day, back at Bade's HQ, Hyeon walks into the executive lounge and finds Yu Seong lounging on the couch. He blunt tells the kid he wants to fight, which surprises Yu Seong since the boss usually avoids his challenges. Hyeon admits he needs some serious training, and he needs it right now. He flashes back to Minjun's power, realizing that a tutorial graduate like him is a threat unlike anything else on Earth. He knows that becoming stronger is his only priority if he wants to survive their final confrontation. His stats are leveling up steadily, but just grinding numbers is becoming too slow to bridge the gap. He realizes that what he needs isn't more strength, but a massive upgrade in his combat technique. He needs to learn how to shred enemies with pure skill, just like the monsters in the tutorial did to him. Hyeon proposes a duel where both of them turn off all their skills and fight using pure technique only. Yu Seong immediately rolls over and says he's not doing it, calling the idea total nonsense. The kid mocks him, saying that without his Z-rank cheats, Hyeon is nothing special and would be a boring opponent. Hyeon's face twists in rage as the brat calls him a guaranteed win, questioning what Yu Seong actually takes him for. Yu Seong laughs, asking if he's scared that his weakness will be exposed, mockingly repeating the word until Hyeon snaps. The kid tells him to try bribing him instead of using weak provocations that wouldn't even work on a toddler. Hyeon sighs and offers a bet if Yu Seong wins, he'll grant him absolutely anything he wants. Yu Seong's eyes light up with a psycho glow as he demands full production rights for Kang Hyun figure series. Season 2. Hyun calls him a crazy bastard, but accepts the challenge, vowing to settle this once and for all. To fix his lack of technical skill, our boy heads to an F-rank dungeon known as the Earthhawk Basin. The monsters here are nocturnal, meaning during the day, the dungeon is basically an empty playground for hunters, a concept called space rental. It's the perfect spot for large guilds to hold group training, or for high rankers to test out their most destructive skills without any distractions. Normally, you'd have to pay the owning guild a massive fee to step foot in here, But the Beatties Guild got a special discount through some very polite physical negotiations, basically. Hyon punched them until they said it was free. Now, the no. One and no. Two of Beatties are standing face to face, ready to see who's actually the better fighter in a pure skills duel. Yuseong doesn't waste a second, lunging forward and swinging his massive spiked mace with lethal intent. Hyon barely parries the blow, his eyes narrowing as he realizes Yuseong isn't holding back even a little bit. Yuseong slams his hand into the ground, using the momentum to pivot his entire body for a follow-up strike. The kid is a blur, catching Hyon in the ribs with a brutal kick that sends a shockwave through the air. Hyon grinds his teeth in frustration, feeling the sting of the blow. He's used to overpowering people, not being outplayed. Yuseong taunts him with a smirk, telling his boss that his movements are way too big and easy to read. He dances around Hyon's sword like it's a toy, showing off the gap in their pure combat finesse. With a crazed look in his eyes, Yuseong raises his mace high, ready to end this little training session. A sickening crack echoes as Hyon's arm is shattered, and out of pure habit, he stops his body from regenerating to keep the duel fair. Hyon stands there with a dangling broken arm, looking more annoyed than hurt while the psycho kid celebrates his opening. Despite the injury, Hyon swings his blade down with everything he's got, trying to crush Yuseong with raw power. But Yuseong just leans back with a confident grin, asking the MC if he wants to know what his real problem is. "You're predictable," he says, effortlessly dodging another massive swing that cuts nothing but air. He explains that to beat a real master, you have to stay one step ahead of your opponent's thoughts. It's not about how hard you hit, it's about knowing how to manipulate the flow of the fight. Yuseong catches the blade on his mace, redirecting all of Hyon's momentum right back at him. Hyon's foot slips as his balance is completely destroyed by the kid's technique. Yuseong leans in, eyes glowing with excitement as he prepares to strike the opening he just created. The mace connects, and blood sprays as Hyon takes a direct hit that would have killed a normal hunter instantly. Hyon's sword flies out of his hand, and he's left gritting his teeth, covered in his own blood and reeling from the impact. Yuseong stomps down on the discarded blade, officially disarming the strongest man on earth. He rests his mace on his shoulder and asks with a cocky tilt of his head, "I won, right?" Hyon isn't done yet. He lunges forward with a roar, refusing to let a brat like Yuseong have the last word. Yuseong just laughs, dodging the punch and asking how he plans to win without a weapon. He catches Hyon with a quick jab to the chin, further humiliating the guild leader in front of his own team. "This is getting boring," Yuseong mutters, his expression going cold as he decides to put his boss out of his misery. A massive explosion of mana rocks the basin, and nearby guild members watching the fight drop their popcorn in absolute shock. Hyon is face down in the dirt, completely defeated by the very kid he recruited. Yuseong tells him to hurry up and regenerate already, while Hyon just groans about what a crazy bastard his subordinate is. With a victory blush and a creepy smile, Yuseong reminds him of the deal. The new Kong Hyon figure is going to be exactly how he wants it. He skips toward the exit portal, already planning the most embarrassing merchandise release in history. Soon, the internet's community radar starts blowing up with a new post from the Beatties Guild. It's a 1/6 scale deluxe edition figure of Kong Hyon, and he's completely shirtless, showing off every single muscle in a very suggestive pose. The comments section is a war zone of laughter and disgust, while Hyon stares at his phone, wishing he could just crawl into a hole and die. He can't believe Yuseong invested his own money to get these into production so fast. Humiliated and desperate to get stronger, Hyon pulls up to a massive, ornate gate. This is a C-rank dungeon called the Night Training Grounds, a place notorious for its difficulty. The monsters here aren't just beasts, they are legendary swordsmen who can slice through an army with ease. Hyon lets out a heavy sigh, looking at the gateway with a mix of dread and determination. He's annoyed that he has to resort to this, but the monsters he's looking for are none other than goblins. He pushes open the heavy stone doors, muttering about how crazy it is that he has to learn swordsmanship from a damn goblin. A heavy thud echoes through the chamber as a weapon is planted firmly into the ground. The dungeon is a massive Gothic castle perched on a cliff, surrounded by crashing waves and a constant mist. Inside, sitting in a meditative pose, is Kurgro, the proud goblin knight who guards these halls. The goblin's eyes snap open, sensing a presence that feels vastly different from the usual weaklings who wander in. Kurgro stands up, his long sword glowing with a faint green mana as he prepares to defend his honor. As Hyon's footsteps echo on the cold stone floor, the atmosphere in the room turns suffocatingly tense. Years later, Kurgro would look back at this moment and realize this was the absolute worst day of his life. Because the man walking toward him isn't a challenger, he's a monster who refuses to stay dead. Most people think goblins are just low IQ pests, but these guys have a civilization and intelligence that rivals humans. Kurgro is the peak of that civilization, a master swordsman whose skills have been honed over decades of combat. The two clash, and the sound of steel hitting steel rings out like a thunderclap through the hall. Hyon struggles to keep up, realizing that Kurgro's movements are fluid and precise, completely unlike the wild monsters he's used to. Our boy knows he has the advantage in strength and stamina, but he decides to put those aside. He grits his teeth, sweating as he forces himself to hold back his godlike stats. He intentionally lowers his physical abilities to rock bottom so he can focus purely on the art of the blade. It's a dangerous gamble. Kurgro is a blur of green and steel, moving with a grace that Hyon can only dream of. A massive overhead swing from the goblin forces Hyon to scramble, his defense barely holding together. He's getting pushed back, feeling the weight of every strike as the goblin knight relentlessly hammers his guard. Blood sprays as Kurgro finds a gap, slicing through Hyon's armor and flesh with surgical precision. Hyon collapses to the ground, his vision swimming as his life force begins to fade. Kurgro looks down at the fallen human, breathing heavily, but showing the respect of a true warrior. In his own language, the goblin knight acknowledges that it was a good match. He raises his sword one last time, promising to send the human off without any unnecessary pain. But then, a soft ah escapes Hyon's lips as his wounds begin to knit back together instantly. Hyon stands back up like it's nothing, a wild grin on his face as he tells the goblin he's finally starting to get the hang of it. Kurgro is visibly shaken, but Hyon just brushes the dust off and asks for another round. Meanwhile, in another dungeon far away, a different battle is raging. A group of living armor, empty suits of plate mail possessed by spirits, clanks toward their next victims. Yusong and Sung-ah are deep in the trenches, surrounded by these relentless metallic soldiers. A heavy stomp shatters the stone floor as one of the armors lunges forward. Yuseong is in his element, spinning his mace and laughing as he prepares to turn these antiques into scrap metal. He delivers a crushing blow to a helmet, the sound of denting metal echoing through the hallway. He's a whirlwind of destruction, leaping through the air and smashing everything in sight. Another suit of armor is sent flying as Yuseong proves why he's the Bayades Guild's top enforcer. He peeks inside a broken helmet and jokes about how it's completely empty, just like his boss's head sometimes. Behind him, Sung-ah is providing cover, firing mana-infused arrows that pierce through the thickest steel. Her magic arrows are devastating, exploding on impact and scattering the possessed armor pieces everywhere. But she's breathing hard. Loading her arrows with that much mana is draining her reserves way too fast. Regular arrows are useless against non-living things, so she has to keep using her skills to stay relevant. Seeing her mana bar hit the red zone, Sung-ah realizes she can't keep this up from a distance. She drops her bow and draws a glowing dagger, her expression turning sharp and determined. She has no choice. She has to dive into close combat to save her strength. Sung-ah moves like a shadow, her eyes focused on the joints of the armor where they are most vulnerable. She weaves through the clashing swords, her dagger sparking as it bites into the haunted plate mail. She's doing well, but a massive armor unit swings a heavy blade that nearly takes her head off. She ducks just in time, her heart pounding as she realizes how thin the margin for error is in melee. Suddenly, Yuseong's mace smashes the armor in front of her, and he tells her she shouldn't be doing this. He reminds her that she's a sniper, and trying to change roles in the middle of a dungeon is a suicide mission. Sung-ah looks down, feeling a bit dejected, but she knows he's right. As they finish off the last of the enemies, Yuseong starts to wonder where their leader ran off to. He asks Sung-ah what kind of training could possibly take this long. She remembers hearing something about a dungeon near Dongdaemun, and Yuseong's eyes go wide. A look of pure realization hits her face. She knows exactly what Hyon is doing. Back at the night training grounds, the sun is beginning to set over the goblin's castle. Kurgro the Goblin Knight is on the verge of a total mental breakdown. This crazy human just won't fall. No matter how many times he cuts the human's legs out from under him with everything he's got, or how many times he hacks his arms into pieces, the human just stands back up and keeps coming. The only thing keeping Kurgro from running away in terror is the code of chivalry burned into his soul. But even that iron will is starting to crack as he stares at the bloody, smiling monster in front of him. Suddenly, a notification pings in Hyon's vision. His intermediate swordsmanship has finally evolved! He's reached advanced swordsmanship, a skill that lets him read every sword path with perfect precision. Hyon is overjoyed, thanking the confused goblin and even calling him teacher. He introduces himself with a huge, friendly grin, asking the goblin knight for his name. In a hilarious moment of chibi-style confusion, the goblin stammers out Kion, while trying to process what's happening. Kurgro places a hand over his heart, acknowledging the strange bond they've formed through hours of slaughter. With newfound respect, he lets out a roar, finally giving his name, Kurgro! Hyon nods, a cool smirk returning to his face as he thanks the knight for the lesson. He turns to leave, casually telling Kurgro that he'll see him again tomorrow for another round. Kurgro cheers and waves his sword, thinking he's finally free of this nightmare. The goblin literally has tears of joy running down his face, celebrating the fact that this hell is finally over. Of course, if he actually understood human language and knew Hyon was coming back tomorrow, he probably would have fainted on the spot. The next day, at the Baiades HQ, the skyscraper is covered in massive banners for the embarrassing figure series. Hyon storms into the lounge and shouts for Yuseong to come out and fight him. Yuseong stands up with a confident smile, more than happy to humiliate his boss a second time. But Hyon points at the screen showing the stacked nude figures and declares that this time, things are going to be very, very different.